Okay, I'd like to call the meeting to order. Stand and salute the flag.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
There's some agendas and other material down front. If anybody in the audience is interested, is certainly welcome to the material. First on the agenda is a citation that we'd like to offer this evening on behalf of the Board of Selectmen in recognizing the contributions of the Women's Center on its 40th anniversary. The Bedford Women's Center was established on October 11th, 1973 to serve the women in the local community. The agency took on the challenge of domestic violence prevention and intervention in 1978 and added rape crisis services in 1983. In 1997, the agency opened up the child trauma program to address the needs of children and non-offending caregivers affected by domestic violence and sexual assault. For 40 years, the Women's Center has provided high-quality, comprehensive services and programming to women, children, adolescents, men, and non-offending caregivers who are suffering the effects of domestic violence and/or sexual assault and others who may be at risk. The agency achieves its mission by offering free and confidential shelter, crisis intervention, a 24-hour hotline, counseling, support, and advocacy to victims and their families. In addition, the center collaborates with area agencies to serve specialized populations and provides preventive education and outreach throughout the service area. The Women's Center continues to change to meet the needs of the community. Together we bring about positive change by emphasizing in prevention and empowering every child, teen, or adult who is violated or abused to speak up and to be heard through the Women's Center. And tonight, on behalf of the citizens of the town of Westport, we extend our sincere wishes to continued success in the future. And this is signed by members of the Board of Selectmen. If you'd like to come up, we'd like to present this. Like this. Let's go around the other side a little easier than you trying to reach over the table.
Thank you. Can we do a little? Yes, a little photo. Thank you so much. This is really, this is wonderful. Town of Westport, of course, is in our catchment area. We do also some great prevention work in your public schools. We're very happy to be there because we do believe that prevention is really what needs to be done so that we're not providing services for another 40 years to victims. So, and we invite everyone who might be listening to come tomorrow night to the steps of City Hall at 6 p.m. and participate in our March of Silence, which we do to honor the victims who have died in Massachusetts as a result of domestic violence. We culminate by going to the Unitarian Society also on Union Street. We march to the Unitarian Society and have an ecumenical service for those victims that we have lost throughout Massachusetts, and most particularly also every year we remember the local victims who've died as a result of domestic violence in our community. Just far too many women, men, and children have lives affected by domestic and sexual violence, and we thank you very much for this.
Thank you for the work you do.
Thank you.
And people don't realize it's only 40 years old. I mean, it sounds it's old, but it's not. I remember when I first started in the police department, we didn't have an organization like this. We didn't have a 209As. We didn't have the domestic violence abuse, and that was horrific for the police department. You couldn't do anything. You couldn't do the prevention. There was never any violation. The orders didn't exist. At least when this organization came on board, it gave us an outlet where we could bring the people there as an intervention, gave a safe harbor. So we worked hand in hand with this organization for many years. It's and took care of Greater New Bedford. That's since now, it's all Greater Fall River. It's all in this area. So probably one of the top 3 in the state of the stuff they do in the outreach. So as a former police officer, I can assure you the service that you provided to the police departments is there. It's immeasurable.
Thank you, and we really depend upon our police departments. And as you said, before such places existed as the Women's Center, there were many, many deaths, but they were not recognized as domestic violence deaths. More and more we're getting the media to recognize when that happens. The next step is broader awareness, and the next step is some real prevention in terms of people knowing what to do to intervene safely when someone they know might be living in domestic violence or dating violence. Last night, there was a wonderful program on CBS about dating violence and breakup violence. So that was a national media event that occurred, and that's great because that causes people to be more aware, and more aware that our young people are very much subject. We call it domestic violence, but it's really, it encompasses all interpersonal violence, including dating violence. And there's 1 in 5 high school students has been affected by dating violence, so it's very important. And we do depend upon our police departments and work very closely hand in hand with them, as we do with you. And Dick himself used to be on the Women's Center board, and he's missed. But we always have an officer on our board because it's really important to keep that collaboration going. If there's anyone out there that's a Westport police officer, we'd be glad to welcome you to the board of directors.
We're looking for a police officer
We
in
are.
Westport, Florida, in that area.
We
We have
are,
somebody from the New Bedford area, but
yes,
I
yes.
did
it would be
about 10
wonderful.
years on that board, but again, it's fine.
It's not tough duty, we do feed you at meetings, it's not really hard, it's 1 meeting a month, we'd love to have you. We really do depend on keeping that collaboration and those lines of communication open, and there's no better way than having a seat right on the board and knowing what's going on. So we welcome you to join us.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, thank you.
Next on the agenda is the Westport Landing Commission. And I see Carl and some members. Please come on down, folks. And we have the Landing Commission on to discuss really the head of Westport and use of the landing and access to the landing, and any questions you may have of the board, or just try to get a sense of how the Landing Commission is doing these days too.
Yeah, grab one of these mics, because the people at home will get mad at me if you don't talk into the mic. Send all complaints to Jeff Gold, we don't care.
So, specific questions about parking, public access, so forth, that the work that we do, is that what they're?
Well, you might want to use the opportunity to talk about, we have a proposed article on the warrant.
Okay, all right.
You might want to address that,
Okay.
so people will be aware of this is being aired and so
Okay.
forth.
Yeah, first off, I'd like to say that, we are, you know, obviously constantly looking at ways to improve the access down there, to the parking down there, as a result of the last so many years, and also having a kayak shop there, which is a perfect spot to have a kayak shop on the river. You know, the whole parking arrangement and access arrangement has been increasing every year. We actually had a meeting last week. Our last meeting, we had with some of the neighbors down there about the parking issue. Specifically, you know, is there any way to expand it? How can we work with them to make sure that everything is accessible and safe down there? So what our long-term plan, long-term meaning over the winter time, is to come up with a comprehensive parking plan down there. Now, whether we have to hire some sort of parking engineer that can look at the parameters of what we have and come out with some specific parking areas. Now, this is for the public access. The land that we lease under the buildings and in front of the buildings is under the auspices of whoever's paying the lease here. They can set up their own parking there. We have no say over that. We do have to maintain it, however. Another addition to the parking is we're also having we also had an idea about taking the land along Drift Road that would be on the west side of the river, and maybe working with the town highway department to create a single car space off the side of the road, you know, depending on what they figure is a safe, you know, a safe amount of space in there. And so that we could possibly park another maybe 20 cars there on a busy kayak day, so they could also have access to the river there, and would alleviate some of the issues that we have in the back now on a busy day. It's a seasonal thing. It's obviously right now you can park there on any day and not have any issues. But along with this, and we also had the proprietor, owner of the Westport, the Head Landing store down there. And, we have no say in how they park or where they park, but a lot of them are parking on both sides of the road now, and I swear, that, I think something like what was done in front of Lee's Market here with a yellow market is gonna be coming up because of the access, people trying to get to the store in the morning. We have people parking on both sides, sometimes parking in the town landing spots. And, you got kids running back and forth to UMass Dartmouth, and there's a lot of traffic there at times, and so I think that's
Have you
something-
talked to Officer Bell at all? He's a safety officer.
A year ago.
Okay. He's presently working on some suggestions on parking and public safety down in the whole head of Westport. Relates to activities with the church on Sunday, it relates to the kayak business, potential use with the watershed. I don't think they're gonna have a tremendous parking increase for their use, but there are still some areas there. They talked about maybe an additional crosswalk, those kinds of things. I think maybe I would suggest over the next week or so, once we receive that report, Jack will forward it to you. You might want to meet with Officer Bell, and
I'd love to have his
then we can
input on
talk about that.
yeah.
I think some of the areas that we asked to at least have the landing commission before us as well had to do with access to the landing as it relates to public access. And I guess there are a few people that had some bad experiences using that this year because of competition with the kayak business at the same time. They probably just so happened they were down as a busy time for both.
Oh, yeah,
So,
yeah.
what's your policy on that, and how is that being handled?
I am in touch with people at the kayak business. They very regularly are helping people who are not customers unload equipment, get equipment in and out, navigate the rather slippery spots here and there. So then they pay for and maintain and clean daily a handicap porta-john that's there for anyone to use, not just customers. So I think they're actually a great resource for the general public. They go way out of their way for people who are not customers. I'm sure at some point somebody's not getting to
So
the
the
water.
landing commission's not aware of anybody
We've
trying to have access
received
to
no
that.
letters, we've
Okay.
received, our meetings are open, and, like I said, the first parking, issue that we have in quite a long while was our last meeting, and we then told them that we are gonna have other meetings for we wanna get the neighbors involved and to see what works for them and what's gonna work for the town. Our first issue is, as being elected officials, public access. So that comes number one, and safe public access is number two. So, and then we have to make sure that our tenants that we have, the kayak shop and whoever's gonna end up owning the other building, that they not infringed upon on their parking. So I think that it's gonna depend on what happens to the building, is watershed get it or not. What they propose, what they see as a parking plan for them. We've heard anywhere from 4 to 6 cars, not on an everyday basis, but on a come and go basis. So probably not a big deal to work with them on that. So, but we'll get them involved in it, and as well as the kayak shop. So everyone has a say and make it fair for everyone.
I think it's also probably important to be clear that the kayak shop actually is not our tenant. It's owned by
Right.
a property owner who holds that property, and that person chooses to rent and has a lease agreement currently with the kayak shop. So while there is communication back and forth between us and the kayak shop, our legal obligation is to the property owner and not the kayak shop. And so they're the landlord, really, of the kayak shop. We are not their landlord.
Right.
I think it's important for people to know that. And
I agree.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I heard from someone representing an abutter to the property, the landing commission's property there, or the town's property there. And that was a parking issue as well. The drive is, apparently, the access point to her driveway is over the landing commission property, is that right?
She has an easement over as anyone does, over the landing. to
Yeah.
the parking area.
Okay.
So, yeah, she's one of the neighbors that we'll be working with
Yeah,
on this as it goes on.
thank you.
That goes across the, that goes across the kayak?
No, it's on the, it would be
west
on the
side?
east side, or along the side of that property. There never was any formal, even when you go back to the former homeowner, there was never really any formal thing written up with them. And then for a long time, the house was empty, so it didn't really, we had no issue with that as well at that time, but we need to do something with it now. We need to, it's just so they have some assurance that they're always gonna be able to pull into their driveway, and that we can mark it off so that we won't have cars parking there. And if we do, then, we'll have them towed, because she does need access to her driveway, we understand that fully. So
Where's the house though, Carl? I'm trying to find it on the map here.
it's directly west of the,
That's the new one they just did over,
east, it's directly east of the,
right at the end of Reed Road and Oak
Right
County
here.
Road.
I'll ask him just to, oh,
Is this the property here?
home yard, no, we're over here.
Yeah.
So this is the house here.
So this is
House
this
is
kayak
over
place?
here. It's behind this box.
Oh, okay. Okay.
That's the house.
But their access comes across the Lanny
Well,
property. I didn't realize
No,
that.
it's your access too. It's public access.
Right, but okay, right.
It's- I mean,
I understand.
and I think it's inevitable when you live next to a public resource that sometimes some of the public is going to park in an inappropriate manner. I mean, that is going to happen.
Yeah, I don't think, I
see.
mean, unless you people, if somebody's got a complaint about some of these issues, they should contact the Landing Commission.
Right.
We're airing this because we've had some individual board members that have talked about this, and we'll refer them, it's up to them to do that. I think it's clear that we have public landings in town, and their access should be available to the public. Obviously, we'd like to have neighbors work with one another, and
Absolutely.
if there's a
Yep.
business next door, we try to work cooperatively with that. I think there had been some cases of other folks, if it's a situation where Dartmouth, I guess, is probably where they hear more from, trying to access the waters in Westport through a public landing, and sometimes not having that opportunity. And I think it probably has more to do with parking, but not necessarily accessing the water.
Well, I mean, access is basically access, I mean, when this law was written, we're talking 1848, so, it was basically, it meant you had access to the water there. Obviously, now, it doesn't mean you have an individual parking spot there.
Right.
But obviously, people drive to the landing with kayaks and stuff on top of their cars. I mean, we have to treat it as the town beach property as well, when it's full, I'm sorry, come back another day.
But if somebody from Dartmouth is coming into Westport and they want to access, or somebody from Westport wants to go into Dartmouth, they can access a landing.
Well,
Correct, there's no
yeah.
permitting is what
Right,
you're asking.
right.
Well, they
There's no
should have a
exclusion.
permit in one of the two towns, I would assume.
There's actually, the landing at the head of Westport was actually written for Dartmouth and Westport.
Right.
And because I think at that point Westport was part of Dartmouth.
Yes.
Whereas the landing over on River Road is for Westport residents in the entire state of Rhode Island.
Yes.
Now, how many people know that, I don't know, but it's up to them to find out. So each landing was designated differently. And so, so I mean, but we've never had any issues, no one's ever called up, and like I said, when we were out of spaces, we ran out of spaces, and then if they're gonna park on the street, well, that becomes a police issue, and so, but on a nice day in Westport, parking is tough everywhere, so.
I'm also aware that the kayak shop does try to help manage the parking, that if they do have a group coming, like they sometimes have a group of disabled veterans that come and that rent kayaks and they help carry them into boats and stuff. If there's a large group, and so that there's going to be, say, 12 cars that come, what they will do is have those cars park each other in so that they don't take more parking spaces away from the general public, so that they are aware of, trying to maximize the use of the parking so that as many people can get on the river as possible. So they're pretty proactive, and they're fairly professional people there and thoughtful. And again, help anyone, whether they're a customer or not, so.
Has the Landing Commission got involved with townways at all?
No. Townways, your jurisdiction. ways, rights of ways are under the selectmen's jurisdiction. When I first got on the board 18 years ago, we had some problems we had some issues at Westport Harbor. And if you look into the town bylaws, we were very happy to find out we didn't have to deal with it. And we came to the selectmen and let them know that, I mean, there are all kinds of water accesses down there that have been, and people buy property without looking into it. And why is this guy walking across, and that's what was happening down there, so that's off of our plate and onto your.
In researching, it doesn't look like, I mean, people have access to the water through the town way, but it's not like a beach property.
Right.
They have access to the water, I mean, they can fish, that kind of deal.
Right, it doesn't mean you
It's
can
limited.
park your camper there, it just means you can walk down to the waterfront there and no one can stop you. And also, we also have areas in, I think at Westport Point, we have 3 or 4 different, we have private ways, we have rights of ways, we have unimpeded access as well. If you have an access that's been unimpeded for, I believe it's 20 years and no one's ever stopped people from using it, it becomes a public way. And so people have tried to put chains up here and there and you know, over the years anyway, and it just can't happen. So you have to kind of know the laws and the public and private way areas that are around. So, but all we do are public are the landing. So.
Any other questions, board members, at all?
Is there any news, Carl? I know we were looking into doing something about the landings themselves with
Yes.
Quar or something.
Now that the season is over, that's on our plate as well too. That the access area on that west side, right behind the kayak shop, I've got to get the conservation agent down there and let her know what our plan is. And once again, just to make it safe, we have some holes and ruts in there. It's just a maintenance issue. You know, we're trying not to get fancy with it because you can go crazy, spend all kinds of money in there. But you know, Mother Nature's just going to come and bring that silt down the river again. So we're looking more like we do with Emma Tripp Landing. It's just basically go in there with with some gravel and kind of move it around and just maintain it. The initial dig is going to be costly because we're going to try and unearth there's actually a stone wall. If you look at some of the old pictures that Al Lees has, there's a stone wall that runs along the south side of that landing area, access area. So we're going to try and kind of put a little character back down there and get some of the sand and silt out of the way, and also make it safer for people to walk down onto. So that's on our plate this winter as well. So.
That was my main concern. I'm the one that wanted you guys to come in tonight. And my thing was the east side, the east landing. And to me, if that would have been anybody else or something like that, the conservation, everybody in the world would be on them. Okay, and that's a shame because it's eroding all that. By walking on it, high tide, the water's up there, then the water, it gets all soft. You look back, they probably destroyed 20 feet back of all this, the grass which is holding together. It's just a big mud flat. It's almost that, it's just, I'd hate to put the store, because the store across the street really depends on the kayak, and in the summertime they sell stuff, and they help out one another. It's a great thing. It's a nice way people to enjoy the river and all that, but it comes to a point where it's destroying that way to get the erosion of the landing. So it's either the responsibility of the kayak place, who they're selling the boat, they're using it, and technically they're destroying it. Their people are destroying it, and I think that's unacceptable. I mean, do I want to go to conservation and put a cease and desist if people use that until that's probably not going to serve the purpose. But the problem is, I think we can't let it go anymore. It has to be done next year, because I'd be definitely be opposed to have that opening up next season and having a mess the way it is now, because anybody else couldn't get away with something like that. And that's all I'm saying. And let's fix it the right way, no matter how we're going to do it. Whether we're going to do it with matting or something, people's going to slip and fall because you're trying to put the kayak, it's all mud. It's a big mud flat, and it's just too bad. So that was my concern. That's why I was
that will be addressed.
Okay, and that's my only other thing. Other than that,
Forward, we're going to have to work a little closer with the landing board over the next year on this. Relates to access to the town landing, but also as it relates to the development of this past year, we've wrestled with the growth, and that's a good thing,
Oh,
of
yeah.
people using the kayak business and the store, but it's also added a challenge for us. So I think once we see Officer Bell's recommendation of public safety, we can kind of see how we're going to handle that. Part of this is a weekend issue too, because the church uses both sides of that road, and that adds to the parking issues. So we'll work it out, but I think, as you noted earlier, that the business itself, that's separate, that's privately owned.
Yeah.
But we have the responsibility of the landing, we also have the responsibility of public safety down there, so hopefully Jack will have it on his agenda here over the next, month or two. We'll try to address this going forward, once Officer Bell has an opportunity to come up with some recommendations there.
Yeah, we'd love to work on that.
We're going to be moving on the agenda here, but do you have any comments that you'd like to make in regards to the article that's on the warrant, relates to you folks?
We were surprised to see the article written as it is on the warrant, because it wasn't, initially, we were looking for the opportunity to extend the lease period on any landing commission lands from 5 years to 30 years. That was the only thing that we wanted to see happen. And what we see written is different than that, and we weren't clear why that has changed. One of the concerns was that the article, in the way it's written, is written specifically to a particular possible buyer of,
No, it's not. You get an old copy, Jeff.
well, I took it off the website today.
Well, then that's not up to date.
Well-
Let me give you.
That's a problem. Anyhow, it was specific to the watershed.
No, it's not. It's general to all current or future lessees.
Well, again, all I,
Thanks
if
for the
it is
tip on
current,
this.
if that is the case, that's of concern
Warrant's right there.
to us, because I took it off the website today.
No, well, we'll update that, but,
Well, second paragraph says, "An act authorizing the town of Westport to lease a portion of town property to the Westport River Watershed Alliance."
yeah, and continue.
I don't know.
Continue.
Well, I understand, I'm not a lawyer.
No.
This references the Watershed Alliance, this references,
Any other lessees, current or future.
well, but it also talks about environmental preservation and educational purposes. What if, for some reason, the watershed chooses not to buy this property? Does this now mean that that building can only be used for educational, environmental preservation and
No. It means that you can lease to all present or future lessees for up to 30 years.
Okay, well, I don't want to have to work this out here.
No,
Our
you don't
cons-
have to, but
our
I think your
concern
point-
was
yeah,
things were
understand.
added to this that were
Understand.
not clear to us, and we've had no communication that made that clear, because I don't, again, I'm not
Okay.
an attorney.
Well,
That was
we'll
one
we'll ask,
concern.
if I could, Jeff, we'll ask that Jack will get in touch with you tomorrow, and we can clarify that, because I think the intention of the board is certainly to support the current prospective buyer or leasing, but also to protect the town's interest as well in the process. So the article, I'm assuming, was going to reflect that, and I think it will. I know Jack, I can vouch for it because I was at the same meetings, I've been in meetings all day, so he probably hasn't had a chance to see what came back from the attorney, but it will be finalized within a 24-hour period, so.
This article?
Yes,
Okay,
and
so
if
there's
it's not,
still revisions being
if
done?
it's not to your satisfaction in terms of the wording from the attorney, please let us know.
Okay, I mean, because the other concerns we had were, there's apparently an issue of fairness, and this references primarily the town landing at the head, and that we also lease a property on on Drift Road that would not be covered by this article. So
I guess
apparently it
our
has
initial
to,
intent was to take the original article
Right.
that was written and change the wording that says up to 5 years.
Yes.
To up to 30 years. And leave everything else
Let me,
the same.
we were under the impression that you folks actually were involved in the discussion with the attorneys on that, but
No.
Jack is talked to the attorneys, making sure we can clarify that, and I think we can get it squared away pretty easily.
and is the third concern we had, is there, has something changed legally so that the Board of Selectmen would be involved in approving the lease, where not,
Yes, only the Board of Selectmen is the only board authorized to lease property.
It hasn't changed, that's actually
Well,
a
we've,
requirement.
we've been doing it since
I know.
1848.
I know.
So we're
I know.
doing it illegally?
Yeah, kind of, but we're not going to make a big deal about that, but there is a procedure. The buck does stop at that level.
Is
in,
this a
you know.
new, is this a new law? When it's been in
No,
effect for-
no, it's not new,
Okay.
no.
Because the original, if you look back at the original 1848 lease,
Right.
it was, lease article, and was voted in at town meeting.
Right.
It specifies, you know, the amount of landing commissioners, it specifies, you know.
All those
the
things
money's
are-
coming off the landing, we're gonna be spent on that landing.
Sure.
It specifies that the town treasurer takes care of the landing trust,
That-
and it specifies that we lease the land.
And you
At
do, but
1848.
the approval of contracts, you know, has always been at the Board of Selectmen's level. Now, sometimes selectmen weren't as active on that, but that's a legal responsibility.
Right.
They're authorized to sign the
So what you're
contract, for
saying-
example.
What you're saying then is we just pass the leases by for your approval?
I would think that presently and in the future, any Board of Selectmen that didn't go with the recommendations and cooperate with the Landing Commission would not be being very fair to the process. But it's sort of like the Conservation Commission or any other agency that's been empowered to do certain things over the years. But contracts, I mean, the procurement laws are in effect now, make it more enforceable under the procurement laws because of valid or invalid contracts. So I think it's to everybody's interest, but it shouldn't be in a way to hamper in any way of what the Landing Commission's functions would be.
Right, okay.
That's all.
And so then there's no change in where the lease, where the lease funds go and how they're being spent?
No,
Okay.
no.
Because that's all, the only income that we have. We've never come to the town for money at all. We try to spend our pennies wisely.
Yep.
When we had the gas quick cleanup 10 years ago, whatever it was, we needed a big chunk then, and we did it, and we're still paying that all ourselves now, all of the cleanup, all of the, the yearly fees, $5,000, $6,000, $7,000 a year that it takes, because we're able to. And so, we can't come run into the town and put the money, see in our coffers, it's not fair.
I mean, Westport's not unique. Other towns have landing commissions, and there's, governmental responsibilities, and selectmen have been, since the beginning of time, the executive branch of the government. They have the legislative branch with the town meeting, and you have different groups and commissions and so forth that serve certain functions. But there's a requirement and responsibility for all those in the process. So it's certainly, I think you people have done a great job. So we're not trying to suggest that there's some reason or whatever, but that's a procedure. Just from a procurement standpoint, it would meet the muster if there wasn't a signature from the selectmen on it.
My understanding is you would still do all the negotiations, do everything, and you just then when it was all done, you'd almost come back and present it, look, and we would take your recommendation, just like we do, say, with the Water Resource Committee or some of these other committees we have. And the final signature has to come from the Board of Selectmen.
We will be rewriting the lease as they are now, because we'll have to put in, if we're gonna give them a 30-year lease, well, we're gonna have to review the rents and stuff in a couple of years. We'll word that in a way.
Yeah, and you would do that with town council's advice, and we would support that financially through the legal budget and all those kinds of things.
Accelerator in the
Yes.
in the monthly lease.
Yeah, the cost of living,
Yeah.
consumer price index,
Figured
what have
that
you,
already,
yeah.
So that would be, okay. All right, well.
Okay.
That sounds.
Thank you, appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, guys.
The next item on the agenda comes from the meeting that we had in Boston last week with the Massachusetts Board of Selectmen Fiscal Policy Committee. Dick, do you want to talk a little bit about these two updates, the Mass Gaming Commission and the slot facilities piece?
Yeah, I talk about something that's convoluted, that the government got involved. There's over 200 pages dealing with the regulations so far with the Gaming Commission. As of right now, they're separated. They separated the slots as well as the full-fledged casinos, like you would say, like Foxwoods and all that. Raynham is, that's the closest one that we're dealing with. It's a slot and it's a parlor. And the next one would be up in Plainville. So some of these things are already moving forward. They separated it. One of the other things, and the only one that's coming in this area, we're in Section C in the region, and right now they're showing the applicant as KG New Bedford, a resort and a casino. That's the biggest one, and the host community is
well, it would be New Bedford. At this time, it's what they're doing is this. They put in an application. It's reviewed. It's two parts. Who is going to apply to put up a casino in XYZ town? It's the A company. The A company has to send a portfolio there. Who are the investors? Who's the people, the board of directors? They want to know the whole history of that organization. And as you can see, what just happened up in Suffolk Downs about a month ago, they disqualified the company that was doing that because there was some issues with the board of directors, the person in charge of that thing. So they felt it wasn't suitable to come in to the game, and so they threw out the application. So everybody has to do that first application regardless of where you're going to go. Once they pass that, then they can move over to step 2, and that's going to be starting after January. And in step 2, they have to have approval and voted on by the host community to get in there. What I was interested in, and again, you can go onto the Game and Mass Gaming .org and look at this stuff. They were talking, and after 15, 20 minutes of talking, I still was just as much confused as when the guy started. But one of the things piqued my interest was surrounding community. So I asked them, can you get surrounding community? What's the definition of a surrounding community? Oh, okay. Is it something continuous? Is it something that borders it? Is it how far out? Is it air miles? Is it border to border? Is it 25 miles out or whatever? No, they just said it's a surrounding community. If you can make a case, so, and I'm just saying, if they were putting a casino in Fall River, we would be close, number one, we'd be bordering Fall River, but we might have some greater issues here where they were driving through certain parts of our roadway to get to that casino place if they would put it. So we would have, never mind we'd be surrounding, but we'd be bordering. But now if something's being built in New Bedford, well, we're not continuous to them, but we're just a surrounding. How would it affect us? Would it affect us by people coming down Route 6? Would it affect us by more patrols or something? I don't know. You have to make your case, and the Gaming Commission will look at it and saying, well, we feel that's enough that you'll get 10%, 20% of the revenues, or whatever it is, or they'll give you a stipend to your community to take care of this, maybe repair your roads and all that. So, again, nothing's written in writing. How good you could write that surrounding community that it would affect you, you'll get money. Again, it's going to be totally at their discretion. Right now, they're just moving forward on some to phase 2, the second act, and I'm pretty sure if the application fee, was it $500,000? Just to put a non-returnable check with your application to look at phase 2, was $500,000. So they want somebody who's serious going to be coming in there. But one of the things before they can move forward, the host community has to vote it in. So that's a work in progress.
Why the Board of Selectmen were even having this on their agenda, so to speak, at the state level was that the Massachusetts Municipal Association sees this as a revenue source moving forward for state budgets. And in return, there'll be some funds going to cities and towns. This is difficult for me because I'm not a pro casino person, but that's what they're using on their side. And he talked about a timetable, and the timetable he talked about was this coming April of 2014, where they would be making the awards on the combination of casino and slots. And there were 3 that they were identified as likely at this point because they have host agreements signed, they have gone to town meetings, and they have approvals, and the suitability is set up, so they're moving them along. One's in the Springfield area, another one's close to West Springfield, another one's in Palmer, and in the Boston area, they had looked at one in Suffolk Downs, and I don't know if you noticed, but in the last week, the people that were proposing Suffolk Downs had withdrawn their application.
Right.
You can read about that and the reasons for that. There's 2 sides of whether they withdrew it or the state asked them to step down, but that's out there. So that one is no longer on the boards right now. There is one in Everett, and there's one in Milford that could be acted upon. And I think you're going to see some action on that. The one in New Bedford, it's still out there. And when Dick talks about folks that are in surrounding communities and host agreements, for example, if Westport wanted some kind of financial benefit because they thought they would be impacted by if New Bedford was successful, they would try to negotiate with the city of New Bedford as they get closer to it to see if they could benefit financially from that interference being impacted, or the infrastructure costs, those kinds of things. But the information is available. There's a website. The folks that are connected and are responsible for the Mass Casino Gaming Commission presented to the Board of Selectmen, or the State Board of Selectmen, and they have a timetable that's listed as well. We have the information. If the public is interested, it's available to them, and we'll certainly provide access to that. The second one that was discussed at that meeting, I think it's worthwhile to discuss with our board a little bit, is the proposed Veterans Director legislation, and that looks like it's going to be effective by November 20th. Everybody in the room felt that it would be passed, and would be passed by November 20th of this year. There would be a grandfather clause, but it would require that cities and towns have certified Veterans Directors. I've talked to our Veterans Director, and he's at training this week, for example, but training alone doesn't cover that. There'll be other requirements. And it's pretty much knowledgeable of the benefits that veterans are entitled to, and this was piece of legislation was initiated by the veterans groups, not by any kind of state groups or selectmen or those kinds of organizations. But it will have a financial impact in how that's handled. There are models. There's a model in Cape Cod where they've regionalized the veterans services to be more cost-effective. In their minds, they have a director and a couple of staff people to handle a number of Cape communities. There's examples that were cited in Western Massachusetts. There's models that people cited that have not worked out too well, and that's when a town is partnered with the city. That doesn't mean that can't happen, but usually the towns feel that they haven't benefited from that relationship financially or service-wise. They haven't. So there'll be a lot of debate on that, but I think as a board, we're going to be looking at this probably in the next couple of meetings a little closer, because when we go through appointments and we move forward in the next budget, we're going to have to start reflecting some of the decisions that come about through this legislation. So there'll be no phase into it. It'll be effective in the next appointment cycle in the next fiscal year for budget purposes. So I thought it was appropriate that we at least spend a moment on it and chat a little bit about that.
Just to touch on it, also, one of the things that they have to do training and they have to get certified. Nobody is exempt, okay? If you're there now, and if you can't get certified and you don't pass the tests, you have to be dismissed. That's the rules. But I think it's a year and a half, whatever the timeline. That's what they're working on right now. So that's something that, like I said, was put out by the Veterans Training Council out of Boston, and that's what it's going to be.
Tony?
Yes.
Did we send, going back one subject to the gambling, did we send our letter, I'm assuming we did, to asking our legislators to support the ballot initiative?
I'm sure we did,
Yes.
Diane. We sent that out over
Okay.
a couple of weeks ago now. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, next on the agenda, I asked to put on the open meeting law and conflict of interest. And the reason I put that on is there's been an awful lot of discussion over the last few weeks, couple of months actually, by different groups in town. And I thought the best way of addressing some of this without getting into individual names and personalities would be to make sure, first of all, that we're following the laws. And secondly, that we provide training. And, you know, by law, we're supposed to be providing training every couple of years in these areas anyways. But part of the situation is some of the folks have attended, some people have not. Some folks may not be meeting the letter of the law in terms of requirements that they're supposed to be doing. But having said that, maybe having a training session for this might be the best way to go, and really ask, in particular, maybe some areas for appointed and elected officials that they participate in those training sessions. So I'd like to do that. I've also passed out, just to the board tonight, a real draft. I'm not asking for comments on it tonight. I'd ask you to take a look at a draft that talks about a proposed bylaw that addresses kind of a code of ethics or a conflict of interest, if you would. And if the board would entertain this, I'd like to put it on the agenda for next meeting as an action item. We could talk about this because I think it's maybe the best way to address that, but I think there are some issues that need to be addressed, and maybe the best way of doing that is institute a bylaw to address that. So again, it's in your packet. If you want to discuss it, we can, but my interest tonight was to at least to suggest this is how I think, and we probably every member of the board has been discussing concerns from different people and different organizations and that kind of stuff. And I guess the best way to, in my opinion, as chair, is to provide training for folks and look at a glass as being half full as opposed to half empty, but look at a situation that should be addressed, and maybe by a bylaw and by an agreement of a consensus of building the language in the bylaw. We can do that. That's just a draft. People can read that and change it around if they would like, and
Do you need a
present
motion to
alternatives.
move it? Do you need a motion to put it on the agenda for next?
Not at all, you know, but I just want to get a consensus.
Yep.
People are happy with that approach. I mean, if you want to discuss other approaches, we can do that. I
But this
just
is not
thought
for
that
the special town meeting, this is gonna be for the annual town meeting.
No, I think it definitely should be
Right.
the annual town meeting, and I think we should address, first of all, the special town meeting is next week.
Right, that's
So,
what I'm saying.
it would be inappropriate for the special town meeting. But it would address some of the issues that seem to be ongoing. It would give some folks that, you know, the benefit of the doubt on some of this, and they could address those things personally, but the training would be really kind of the people that are interested in getting a better understanding of both the open meeting law and the conflict of interest and code of ethics would have an opportunity to have that discussion in that forum. So are we all okay with that, or any?
I just won't be here on that meeting.
Okay, well, we'll put it in another meeting if you want.
Yeah,
We can
move out to
I mean, we got a little bit of flexibility, so we can move it out to
4 weeks.
4 weeks. Diane, why don't you do that? We'll move it out. And in the meantime, please read the proposed bylaw and, you know, talk to people about it, whatever, and see what you think about it. But I'd like to see if we can build some consensus. Again, this is just a draft. We got to start someplace. I think it addresses some of the areas that people have concerns with, and if that meets with the group, then we can go from that at 4 weeks from now. Okay.
I'd like
Do you have a
to speak
question,
on
Mark?
this if I could. I was recently back in the town election as a write-in candidate, elected to the planning board. I had a conflict of interest. I took a course on online training. They give you a printout of what conflict of interest is about. They give you a copy of the open meeting law. I'm just wondering if this isn't a little bit redundant. If we're going to be so qualified to be appointed, we ought to be able to read the law without being forced to take such steps. It would seem to me that people that are interested in being on a board and knowing what the laws are would take interest in making sure that they themselves adhered to it. And I mean, like, as I say, here's a certificate of completion, conflict of interest law. What more would your board need than that type of certification? With the open meeting law, this is a guide to read. I mean, do we need a course on it? I mean, I think it's incumbent upon any appointee to read what they're supposed to be aware of, to be qualified to do, and that's why they got appointed from the board who appointed them. You wouldn't want to appoint somebody who wasn't qualified or capable of reading, and I'm sure anybody that serves on a board in this community knows how to read. So that's my comment on it.
Okay, well, you appreciate your comment, sir. I think you can see the board has at least decided that this has some merit to bring forward for discussion purposes. Jack, is everybody who's appointed and elected meet these qualifications right now? Have done the documentation?
Well,
I'm not asking for names, I'm just saying, has everybody?
I don't believe so.
Okay.
I think we've got...
That's enough, that's enough. Again, I don't want to get into personalities, I don't want to get into individuals, but I think if, at this point, what I'd like to do is give everybody the opportunity, we're serious about this as a board, and I'm serious about this as chairman, and again, I'd rather not get into individuals. I'd ask them for one more shot at it, and they can decide what's appropriate for them. But I think my position as chair is I take this very seriously, and that's why I had it on the agenda. Okay, next,
Excuse me, could I ask one more question?
sure.
If that's the case and the board here was elected, have you all passed that, taken that?
Yes, we have, sir.
You have? Okay,
Yes.
that's good. That relieves my mind
Yep.
somewhat.
Okay. And again, I'd like to respond to your comment. I'd like to get this out of personalities. We have a form of government. We're part of that form of government. We all are. And as taxpayers, we're a form of part of this government as well. And we're just trying to be as fair as we can in the process. If part of an executive branch of government identifies some issues that have to be addressed, I'd like to do that in a way that's open and transparent, but not in a way that's going to be embarrassing to individuals that I think have contributed in many, many ways positively to our community. But at some point, we have to move those people in that direction to be in compliance with those issues. And that's what I think we're trying to address with this. At least that's what I'm attempting to address, to try to keep it at that level.
One thing?
Yes.
In addition to this open meeting law and conflict of interest, Copeland, it's serious enough that Copeland and Page will come once a year and do the training. They'll come in the afternoon for people who are town employees, and they'll come and they'll stay in the evening for people who are working for individuals who are on different committees. And they're always changing. It isn't the same thing, what was 5 years ago, 6 years? They're changing monthly. So, so much so, I think it's over a year and a half, almost 2 years since Copeland and Page came down to do a training. And again, they recommend once a year, free of charge, they come down. So there's got to be something in it for them to keep, and it's not just us, they go through all over the state. So I think we'd be remiss by not, we get new members that come on board. And again, we'd be remiss by not taking advantage of this free training seminar.
Okay, next on the agenda is the Affordable Housing Design Plan for Nookchoke Village. I asked that be put on this evening. And Jack, I asked some questions that came out of the last meeting, and you got some responses from that. So do you want to speak to that? I think you passed out that. Jack just got this just before this meeting started tonight, so.
Well, I also provided you with the pilot information from our assistant assessor, Ellis Whittington, and the appropriate pages from the land development agreement and purchase and sales agreement to reflect that the pilot that has been negotiated, $22,000, is more than a comparable project would be paying based on other like projects that exist already today in town.
Is that at 25% or is that at 100%?
I don't know, I'm just reflecting the...
So whatever it was, it's equals apples to apples.
Yeah, yes. Understand it to be. You want me to just comment on the rest of it?
Well, there was, by way of background, there was a hearing for Nookchoke Village last week at the McNamara School, and there was some discussion. There was a nice presentation in terms of where people stand now, and there was some discussion in terms of the breakdown of rentals versus purchase, and I asked Jack to research that a little bit more and talk to folks from Affordable Housing Trust on that as well. And there was also a question in terms of the pilot as related to the contract. If we go forward with supporting the pilot, does this limit the idea of going with nonprofits and not having any private ownership? And so there's a series of questions we received tonight, some answers to the questions. The first question was, I understand at the hearing there was a concern about mixed ownership and rental projects to all rental project. Coming from initially, the request for proposals had ownership and or rental. And the request for proposals were accepted by or was reacted, well, I shouldn't say reacted, we had one bid, and the one bid had all rentals in it. So from that point forward, it became an all-rental project based on the bid, and I think the affordable housing, Greg, you're a member of this committee, feel free to speak up at any time, but I think the intention at that point was to go with an all-rental. And the concern on this particular deal, as it breaks down from rental versus private ownership, we got some answers that from the attorney that kind of supports that's kind of when the change was made. Up until that point, they were looking at a request for proposals for both, but the request for proposal came in for all rental, and discussions from that point with the group became how they were going to manage this, a business model with rentals.
I mean, the attorney's answer is, it is my understanding that the community builders explored financing for both rental and ownership projects and found that market conditions over the past several years do not support for-sale ownership projects, and that the demand for rental developments is much stronger, and B, financing for ownership projects is greatly reduced, and that federal, state, low-income tax credit financing, which apply to rental projects, is more readily available. We actually found out that tax credit financing, which had been available for home ownership affordable rental housing programs, has been suspended in Massachusetts and doesn't currently exist. You know, I think one of the things that we should remember is that when we started the initial plans and drafting of the RFP for Nooksack Village, we were in one economy. And what happened in the last 3 years not only affected amount of government financing for public works projects like this, but also impacted the access to credit and the availability of people to mass savings sufficient to get credit. So there are actually 3 builders, and we've got several members of the Housing Trust here, would like to call on them as needed, who've been involved with this project longer than I have. I believe we had 3 bidders. And anecdotally, when they came in, not 3 bidders, but 3 interested parties.
Interested parties, yeah.
And when they came in on the site visit, 2 things became evident from those visitors. A, that unless there was a deeper town subsidy, and that unless we were going to put more money into the project, doing it as anything but a rental project was not going to be feasible. And Attorney Carr, you were there.
I'd like to control this a little bit for the board's situation, so we can move on if we can.
But as you know, we all got the RFP in our project.
Right.
The RFP did not prescribe one or the other.
It said and/or.
It said and/or, and then further said that the orientation and the selection would be towards that project or that proposal that provided the highest level of affordability.
Understand, but you were at that meeting as well, and
Yep.
I think you saw the reaction. It was the first time that the neighbors, the abutters, had an opportunity to hear that. And quite frankly,
That's not true.
That's not true.
well, at least they,
Well,
okay, then that was what was said at the meeting, okay?
Yeah.
Let's not
Through the
debate that.
chair.
It was true that was said at the meeting, correct?
It was said, but we...
Okay, all right, so,
It was said, but
okay, so let,
we have held.
excuse me, sir. I'm chairing the meeting.
Yes, understood.
So, okay, so let me speak, okay? I'm controlling the meeting as a chair, okay? Right now, the reason I asked it to come before, because I think some of those folks, whether they were told at other times, I don't think they felt that this was, I mean, one person mentioned and left the meeting because they said, the only reason I was here, I thought there was an opportunity for ownership. I see that's no longer an option. What was said, and what was said here tonight, and I received this letter from the attorney less than an hour before we began this meeting. We're just finishing up on another meeting. Jack made copies. And it was said that the determination for the rentals was in demand, and that the determination for ownership was down. There wasn't a demand for ownership. Now, I can understand if the Affordable Housing Trust is looking at this and looking at what's the best deal for the person who's submitting a bid. But I think we're looking at this for the best deal for the opportunity for our town and affordable housing units as well. There are presently, according to the website for Affordable Housing Trust, and I pulled this out at very little time based on this information I received tonight, but I made a copy of the appendix that's on the Affordable Housing Production Plan for June 2012. That's your information. And the Affordable Housing Group lists 224 units that are affordable in Westport at that time. And of them, 188 were rentals out of 224. Also, on the same website, I got an Appendix A, which related to the units, and I found out that in terms of the demand, because one of the other things I heard, and I heard from the attorney today, was that the big demand, and I think we have an email from Elaine Ostroff that talks from the affordable housing standpoint, is that the demand is in for the rentals, and that's where the big shortage is. And first of all, seeing the shortage, there's certainly less private ownership. Of the 224, there were 188 that were rentals, so I don't think that bodes too well. But secondly, I looked at vacancies rates, because that was one of the things people were talking about. And the vacancy rates, that's on page 23 of the housing profile. It talks about ownership units. Right now, in 2000, the vacancy rate was 0.6, and now it's 1.2. So there's a low vacancy rate for ownership of affordable units. But for rental units, in the year 2000, it was 2.5%, and today it's 6%. So again,
I don't know what that means, because.
Well, let me finish, and you have a chance to react to what I'm saying, okay? And maybe I can explain. What that means to me, okay, is that there's less, right now, vacancies in rentals, and there seems to be a demand and an interest. Certainly, I attended, you attended, there were other selectmen that attended that meeting. There seemed to be interest in the room. Some of the folks that were not abutters there were interested in affordable housing units that they could purchase. And there seemed to be interest within that room of people that wanted to see a mixed use, because that was the project that early on was talked about. And it may be the only way that this works going forward is that it's all rentals. But that is a little difficult right now for some of the folks to swallow, because they had envisioned something that was a little bit different. And now, if we're saying that we can't build 29 units or 30 units over that acreage that are going to be single-family homes, or you know, that are going to be separate, I can understand that might be a little costly. But say if the market rate is $200,000 for a home, and it's an affordable home, and it's built for 140 or 150, and there's a supplement done that way, that's an affordable housing option, and it provides ownership. What we have now, because of the business model, is a person who's going to be developing it, doing units that are closed together, sharing common walls in a townhouse model that's less expensive to construct. So I can understand why it might be more attractive. I can also understand why there's credits available at the state level for this to encourage people to go in with a different model, a rental model. You know, but I think that was a concern, and I told the people that I would bring it before the board to raise that, to let them know that was a concern. I know there's at least a couple of people in the audience, and there are people at home that are questioning, is there an option available to the Affordable Housing Trust to look at, before we finalize this, to look at some ownership for some properties, even if the model doesn't work for the single-family homes, it's ownership in some of the townhouse units, to allow some, the opinion of some of the people that were there, to allow some pride a little bit differently than rental pride would be, and having ownership pride in terms of maintaining that property a little bit differently, and just providing a little different image, if you would. Now, we can debate the advantages and disadvantages, but I think we can all agree that there may be some substance, that an opportunity for ownership to have a little bit more pride than it would be if it's a rental unit, that's all. So then I would turn it over.
All I can say is we have a signed purchase and sale agreement. It constitutes a contract. It's in response to an RFP. All the information came before this board on several occasions. It was thoroughly discussed and disclosed, several public hearings, tours, presentations. We have, in fact, developed an affordable housing purchase program in town with some funds from the Community Preservation Act. We solicited proposals from potential qualified buyers. I think we actually had applications from 10, ended up with 2 that qualified, and the 2 that qualified thus far have been unable to secure property based upon the market value of housing in Westport. I mean, the market value of housing, purchase housing in this town is over $300,000 a year. That's one heck of a mortgage unless you have an awful lot of equity in another property or you have a substantial down payment. Even with the ability in this affordable housing program to provide up to $100,000 worth of assistance to permanently restrict that property at a below market level, we have still had difficulties in finding qualified individuals and qualified properties to do that. But I would encourage those people that are interested to contact the housing specialist who's in Town Hall on Wednesdays. His name is Leonardo Ray. He works with people in trying to find the right match and programs for not only rental housing, but affordable home ownership. And we view that as part of our overall mandate as a housing trust, and are looking for opportunities for that. We didn't find it with this particular project, but we also felt that there is still a tremendous need for affordable rental housing in the town of Westport. There is demand for that in the town. And we are, and we did a poll of town employees regarding housing needs, and found that a sizable number were living out of town because they couldn't find affordable rental housing in town or affordable purchase housing in town, and would move back to town if they had that opportunity.
So you mentioned, Craig, that it was your understanding that it was all rentals, and this board should be aware that it was all rentals?
Yes, because they did presentations on at least 3 occasions during and after the, and before the purchase and sale.
So, but you also recognize
March
that-
7th, 2011, initial presentation of the board. December 11th, presentation at the meeting. This would be, the trust met with, did a presentation here 10 months ago. And then the TCB, the TCB did a presentation to this board last month. So there's been, the affordable plan has been presented to the board, the Nokichoke RFP, the purchase and sale agreement has been voted and approved by this board, and there's been at least 2 TCB presentations and at least 2 or 3 other presentations made by the Affordable Housing Trust.
Then, with the presentations that were made with the townhouses, you never considered them to be purchased as townhouses, which certainly would be a lot less than the figures that you quoted. That wasn't never discussed as purchase.
I would encourage you to recognize Attorney Corey, who is a...
I will, but I think I want to keep it at the board level, because there's some other issues that I think this board needs to be aware of, and I want to make sure that we have other board members aware of it. Because I don't think there was a complete understanding. Listen, I didn't have an understanding that we would close the door entirely on purchase, on ownership.
Then I don't know how much clearer it could have been. I mean,
Okay, well, let me explain.
The word 50 rental units means something, you know?
Well, no, the word 50 units means something, and/or purchase was
That was-
always included in every... Okay,
Nothing
okay.
since 2011.
Then I'll back off of that. But if
It
you
might
say-
have been in earlier presentations.
Okay,
But-
then let me let that lay there, okay, if that's the case, all right? And I don't want to debate that. I think that changes drastically, up until that time, the understanding of this community and what we were doing with the Nokichoke Village. I don't think there's any question about that, because everything up until that time was discussed to be a combination. At one time, I think it was 60-40 for ownership. That combination changed for maybe very valid reasons. Maybe that's the only way we could put this together. I'm not arguing those issues, but it changed, and it's all rental now. Now, I think before I open it, I want to make sure that if the board members were that understanding, then fine. But we also, most recently, and you asked me to do this, and Jack asked me to do this, to sign off on the Mass Works grant for funding. And I supported you folks in doing that. I signed it off, and we brought it to this board. Now, in that funding, it was infrastructure. I finally got a copy of what that detail, that funding was, and I saw in that we're talking about possibly tying in, I think it's a good idea, quite frankly, tying in to maybe Dartmouth for water. Was that discussed at the affordable housing? Is that part of the minutes?
Yes.
Okay, and tying in for possibly sewage, was that discussed?
It's been discussed.
Okay. Was the board aware of that we've had discussions with another town in terms of these?
It predated, Mr.
Excuse me, sir. You'll have an opportunity to talk, okay? Right now, we're talking,
Wasn't on the board.
I wasn't,
I'm talking, we're having a conversation. You have a right to listen.
well, you're
and
putting
we'll
out
give you this opportunity.
misinformation. You got a gentleman who was part of the negotiations, was on the board before I was.
Right,
and
right.
He could answer the question.
Yeah,
So what
but-
you do, raising all these allegations and suppositions,
Wait a second. Wait, hey,
Jesus, Kelly.
hey,
Now,
listen,
hit me with it, come on.
Come on, guys.
listen.
You know,
listen,
it
listen.
should be reasonable,
Craig, come on.
logical discussion. You've got 2 people
Right,
here that
right.
have been part of this board,
And
and
what
you
we're-
don't want to listen to them.
No, I will listen to him. I told the gentleman that I would listen to him. What I've said and what I have on discussion right now is you asking me to sign.
2
which-
years ago,
Can I
TCB came in.
finish?
Yes.
I allowed you to do your little rant. Can I finish, sir?
Well, I've been hearing your end all night, so
Okay, well, I apologize for that, sir. But
I
can
apologize
finish
for
my-
ranting back at
Good,
you.
thank you, I appreciate your apology. Okay, now, what we have here is, I've been asked, as the chair of this board, to sign off on MassWorks, okay? I've signed off on, and I still don't have a problem that it went out of town. But I did not have that understanding that that's what we were signing that evening. That was never discussed, that it was going to, part of this infrastructure had to do with water and sewage issues, because we have been asking as a board what plan we had for water and sewage as it related to Nokichoke and as it related to Forge Pond and as it related to the Quinn
The
property.
plan,
Let me finish. That's why I raised that issue this evening. It's not that I think it's a bad idea. 10 years ago, we were talking to Dartmouth about possibly doing something with them with water and sewage. But the process that we're taking, I want to be very clear and very transparent about it, because you were saying, well, we knew about this issue with rent, and we knew about this issue that related, that we weren't going to do any ownership. So I want to be very clear. I signed on that in good faith, members of this board. If the board was aware that this included these things, fine. I certainly wasn't. And until I got that copy and impressed with a copy of what that entailed for that 1.9, it was a range of 900,000 to 1.9. And when I saw that for the first time the proposal in detail at that hearing, I saw for the first time we were looking at a proposal that talked about a business model that works if we get heavy state funding for it, and if it doesn't work. This isn't going to, unless we get heavy contributions at the state level, this project doesn't come together. So I'm a little bit more concerned in terms of what we have been in discussion with the Affordable Housing Trust on, and as you're the representative for that group coming before this board, I want to make sure at least maybe I'm the person that's out in that field and understand it, but if the other two board members are the understanding what you're talking about, fine.
I am not intimately familiar with the MassWorks contract. I have not seen it as much as you've seen it. What I understand was it was for some infrastructure works related to the project itself. I do not believe that at least in the version, my last briefing I had at the, it said anything about tie-ins with water and sewer with Dartmouth. That the project, the supposition we had been working on, everything was going to be on site. And the question was where was it going to be on site based upon some tests you had to do, what was going to be the load that you needed to have for the septic system, where the wells were going to be located. And my understanding is that is the concept of this. Others have raised, and it was raised in the past prior to my time on the board, why can't we, look at tie-in with Dartmouth? And at the time that was first raised, my understanding was Lincoln Woods, or whatever that's called, was a much bigger potential user of water and sewer resources. It was mixed commercial, high-density residential. Now it's simply high-density residential with some maybe light commercial future potential. So that project has been considerably scaled back. And recently, I have heard, but again, it has not been part of the deliberations of the Housing Trust, but, what's the possibility of going back to Dartmouth? Because this the reasons why they couldn't accommodate us years ago was because what was before them at that time and the scale of what was before them that time. And what is before them now and what's under construction now is far less intensive than what was initially proposed for that parcel on the former Lincoln Park.
Jack, were you aware that they were talking to Dartmouth on this at all?
No, the notes I have indicate, well, we have answered that question from Attorney Sharon Everett.
Yeah. Well, no, it's okay. And I know the attorney is suggesting that she had some conversation with somebody on it. But in terms of what you just said, Craig, you were the understanding, and I was under the same understanding, that we were doing stuff on site.
Correct.
I have no problem with, if somebody told me that, I'd still sign it. That's not the issue. But I don't want to be blindsided 6 months from now, somebody come in and saying, well, you signed it 6 months ago, what are you talking about? Because I never saw the details of it. When I finally saw the details, it was something different that was presented to me. Now, having said that, I would still support it, but if it wasn't discussed by the Affordable Housing Trust, if you're not aware of that proposal, you people should be.
Can I just ask a question, Tony, just for clarity?
It was not discussed in the context of the MassWorks applications. What I said earlier was it had been discussed in the past, but it was not discussed in the context of the MassWorks
Not only
application.
was it discussed, it was part of the dollar amount that, and I asked Jack, and I got a copy of it, I can pull it out, I don't want to spend a whole lot of time on this, but it centers around that whole proposal. And I don't even, they used 1.9 in their plan. You were at the plan on Monday, on whatever that date was, at the Macaba School. They had 1.9 there. That was part of their business model. If that doesn't work, they're not gonna have a closing next year. Plain and simple.
Well, they also had an on-site number, which was considerably less.
You weren't at the hearing.
No.
At the hearing, they had the 1.9 as part of their proposal to go forward, and if this works, they will go forward. If not, they're gonna ask for a delay because they won't have the proper funding. This is all subject to funding.
I understand that. I also I'm not aware of what the 1.9 entails. My understanding was if they got the lower amount, which was part of the original application, it was enough to fill the gap that would enable them to maintain the project going forward. They were able to, that's simple. I don't know and understand this new information about the 1.9. And I don't know, nor apparently, because I'm looking at my colleagues in the audience, nor does the other members of the Housing Trust present, know what the additional $1 million requested for. And if it is for infrastructure tie-ins, I think that would be great. Because it would deal with one of the big issues that we have, which is we're going to try to make this a nitrogen-neutral project, because it sits adjacent to the Nokochoke River and in the watershed for the Westport River. And one of the things that we have really emphasized in our RFP and our negotiations with TCB is to try to make this project nitrogen-neutral through the kind of on-site treatment that we would have with that. If you had a sewer tie-in, heck, that would be easy. You're not sending somebody into another town for treatment. And if you've got the money to pay for it, again, I'm speculating because I haven't been briefed on this, that wouldn't be a bad idea. But right now, the members of the trust and the proposal that we approved and the last presentation that was made before this board and our board, we had a smaller number for the Mass Works proposal, and that number presupposed on-site sewer and on-site wells.
And I would agree with most of what you just said there, Craig. The problem is, I was asked to sign something that didn't have that kind of detail. And in inquiring about this, finally getting some information, I'm hearing tonight that discussion never took place at the Affordable Housing Trust. Yet, we have submitted with the towns, with my name on it, suggesting this is actually what we're asking for. So, and when I asked Jack if he had any knowledge of this or any information on it, he had not. I asked him to then get in touch with the director to get some copies of what because I've asked for this more than once. And what we're looking at is a project here, and we've empowered the Affordable Housing Trust folks to run with this. But periodically, there has to be a check once in a while, who's minding the store? So, I get a little concerned if I'm signing off a request for 1.9 million and not having details of what that consists of. No one's seeing the details, even though I don't object to the details, but they're different than the assumption that I was going forward when we were talking about this. When Michael asked the question about why are we asking for different funding, I said, well, we're going to be asking for different funding. This is a nonprofit. This isn't going to work without the different funding. When I looked at the business plan for the first time at the Macaba School, that's all it is. It's if you take that out, the nonprofit's contributing very little to this business model. That's what was presented in the slide presentation that night. So it looks like a different project to me. And then I'm looking at, well, okay, we're into this now. I looked at the affordable housing site development plans and look at all your material, and I was trying to come up with the rationale that people use for we have this big demand for rentals, and in looking at what the appendix says that you people have out, showing that we've got a heck of a lot more rentals that were developed in 2004 and 2005, very little ownership, and ownership was part of everything we submitted a proposal on. And listen to what the neighbors had to say. Is it too late to look at ownership as part of this deal? That's why, and when I asked that question at that meeting, and TCB said, it's not too late. And I asked him about the issue with the Quinn property, and he said, well, that was what was told to them, that they basically, the Quinn property was being identified to be used for preservation purposes, which I think is a good idea. The people at Affordable Housing, they decided that's fine. But that's not the way it was presented. We were always told that TCB came back with that proposal, and TCB said, no, that was, and it's, again, we have a tape of that meeting, so we don't have to debate who said what. But TCB said, no, that was how it was presented to them.
The RFP in our package tonight, which was issued long before TCB was identified as potential, call for that, because of the high density of wetlands on that property, call for that to be used as open space and recreational use.
Not all of it. Not all of it.
That's
But I
right,
was-
not all of it, and also, now that you bring up the RFP, it also has throughout it, every time, it's talking about, purchase, rental housing, a combination of the two, and/or, I can outline the pages for it, goes on, and it was signed, by the way, by Michael Coughlin and Steve Willett as chair of the board. So, that's the thing that you're referring to, and I don't think it's unreasonable in February of 2011 to have neighbors assuming that that's what we're going with. And as a member of the board, maybe other board members assume that, hey, this was left a long time ago, but this is all rentals. I was under that impression. I'm still not under that impression, because I do think that if the model is, and we've got people that are in the construction business in the room, if you can't build an affordable single unit, you can still build a townhouse that's affordable, and you can still have a purchase of that townhouse. That can be a sale, doesn't have to be a rental, doesn't all have to be a rental. And I think it's really kind of, we've heard people from the community 10 years ago, we heard them last week saying the same thing. We're sensitive, we live in a neighborhood. You said it wasn't an issue for them, but it is an issue for other folks. And folks are saying, we're sensitive to the fact that if this is an all rental, what this means to our neighborhood, and if it's a combination of mixed use, we think it would have a better impact with our neighborhood and the values of our property. I don't think that's unreasonable. And if we can talk to TCB, and they said very publicly at that meeting that they would be willing to look at that, we can talk to them. I'd ask the Affordable Housing Trust to try to do that, and
Okay.
see if that's a possibility.
I don't have any problem with doing that myself, but I would ask you to recognize Attorney Corey, because he has been involved with this project, and I think there have been some statements made that are less than accurate, and I think that somebody who's been involved firsthand with the project, who's here representing the Affordable Housing Trust tonight, should be given a chance to answer some of these questions.
And I'll give them that opportunity, but first, I want to give the opportunity to board members to be heard.
Mike, you mind go first, Mike?
Go ahead, Dave.
Okay. And getting back to Mr. Ducha said about 5-6 years ago, when Lincoln Park was going to be done, we looked about, I remember, for some other issues about maybe tying into Dartmouth on that side for storage and or water, whatever, something around there, and it was unavailable due to the fact that, like he says, that Lincoln Park was such a big place. They didn't even think they could even take all that capacity, so they scaled it all back, and now it came back to that, and I think it would be a good thing if, in fact, the affordable housing could tie into Dartmouth. It'd be a cost, but that it'd be burned by the group, by the users over there. And again, other than that, they'd have to have a standalone system, which would definitely take care of the nitrogen as well. But I can tell you, I was just going through in my head, I was always under the understanding and different reading that it was going to be a mixture, not 50-50, 60-40, 70-30. Some is going to be affordable housing for people to buy, and some is going to be affordable renting. And that was always in my mind. I got 5 people, not 300 people, I got 5 people who told me that they were waiting for this to come, that they wanted to purchase a home inside there. And two of them work for the town, and the other three of the division do not work for the town. So there is a demand and there is a need for have affordable housing that people want to purchase. They didn't mind it was mixed use in between there, between the rental and they were happy with that. But I think for somehow it got changed going strictly to all rental. That's leaving a bad taste in some people's mouth. That's all I'm saying.
Well, I have to plead in ignorance of the, actual specific abutters concerns, but they're valid. People have brought up concerns, and that's what you folks are talking about, the split use. This deal is a very, very complicated arrangement, has a lot of moving parts. And the problem I see as, someone looking from the outside, we didn't nail all those moving parts down before we had a P&S. And that's one of the issues that we have here. I think we signed a grant for $1 million, didn't we?
No, it was up to 1.9.
Did it have, okay, I thought it was $1 million, so it was the same number. But these things, and there's 7 or 8 components to the sources of funding here. All of them, or most of them, are in question. So the whole deal hinges upon a timeline for TCB that gets most of those sources in place. And what we don't have is a number that says, okay, if you get this much, it's a go. If you don't, we're going to have to cancel the project. But you might get up to this much, and at some point, we might have to apply for more grants on behalf of TCB. All those things should be nailed down, and they're not. What point do we say no to the next grant that they come and ask us for? Because it wasn't part of the P&S. We have no obligation. So what I'm saying is one of the arguments that we're getting into here is there's too many moving parts that were not nailed down ahead of the P&S. The P&S was, of course, as you know, Craig, we talked, was signed. We just signed it a couple of months ago.
Mm-hmm.
It needed to be signed back in March, so it could be part of the submission in April to qualify for funding in August. And that's one of the main reasons that the funding was not, we were knocked right out of the box. We did not have our paperwork taken care of. Our deal had not progressed to the point of applying for funding that would be granted, would have been granted this August.
I think the timeline is a little bit different, but in general, what happened was we probably were part of the problem. I mean, you go back and diagnose the pace and the speed of this. We often took a while. I think we were looking at a June deadline for having the purchase and sale executed. It actually came before both the housing partnership / trust, housing trust, and before this board, and no one wanted to rush the execution of the document, so the document was actually put on for the July meeting, and it was submitted to DCHD after the submission was due in June. But my recollection was we were as much of a party to the delaying that submission on time as the other party.
Then if that's the case, Craig, somebody has to hold our feet to the fire. Somebody needs to bring that agreement to us for approval. If it needed to be June, and I'm told it needed to be April, they needed to demonstrate site control in April for their application. They didn't do that until we finally signed it. I think we signed it in September, is what I recall.
No, July 28th was when we signed the P&S.
Okay. The point is, it was already months late, and it impacted the assessment of that application. So that's just one moving piece that wasn't taken care of. I want to go back to what's probably most important for our warrant article that's to be considered. It relates to the pilot program. And Jack just gave us these figures tonight, right, Jack?
Yes.
Okay. This is an analysis that tells us that the commercial value of this nonprofit enterprise, based on its nonprofits, is around $1.5 million. We're looking at a project that's going to cost $14 million to build. And that actually includes the purchase of the land. $14 million project is only worth 1/10 of its value. Now, that may not be a problem that's just with Nookchook. It may be a systemic, a problem in the way these things are analyzed. But that's not right. You spend $14 million, and the town values it at 1/10 its value. And then we feel good about getting the taxes based on $2 million.
I don't believe that.
So all I'm saying, I don't want to debate this tonight, but I think the proponents of this need to be prepared to talk about it.
We will be.
And make the case.
Because some of this is, again, the 1.3 million is the annual value of the enterprise, not the total value of the enterprise, is my understanding. And it'd be like building Gillette Stadium for $54 million and saying that you should tax it at a rate of $54 million every single year. I mean, the fact of the matter is, I was a little bit, and I think some of my colleagues who don't spend a lot of time with property assessment were somewhat taken aback when we saw the method of evaluation for this project. We asked for comps for other projects which were a mixture of nonprofit and for-profit, and it was consistent. So whatever it is, I don't understand
It could be systemic, but it still needs to be addressed.
And I agree.
And what it amounts to is that basically, as a town, we're annually subsidizing the project, and I don't know if the degree to which we are subsidizing it through a reduced tax rate is counted somehow or credited towards the project.
And this analysis done by the assessor, it's the exact opposite. We have a project which is, annual property tax is, it's estimated to be around $10,000. There are two numbers, 9 and 11.
And you get 22.
And we're going to be getting 22, so it's more than double. What they said would be the taxable value of the property.
So, as I said, when you build a house and you spend X number of dollars on it, and you buy the property, you kind of expect that they're probably going to tax you at something close to that, not 1/10. Or in this case, it'll be 1/5.
It's the town's property. What we're doing is we're taxing them for the value of the rental income enterprise.
We're not going to own this.
No, it's how, this is the town and state assessment that's being done. This isn't being done on the formula that the Affordable Housing Trust or TCB provided.
Just one second, but we're not going to own this, right?
No.
Okay, so it's not our, he's buying the property from us. He's
But it's
putting
the
up
way-
$14 million worth of structure,
Right.
investment, and we're going to tax him at a rate that is 20% of that. We're going to value his property at 20% of that, and then we're going to,
My understanding is the valuation, the taxation is based upon the value of the enterprise, not the structures. It's the income on the property is what's being taxed.
I'm going to ask that we certainly recognize Brian and Warren, if he wants to speak as well, on this. We try to move along. We'll have this as an agenda item at the next meeting. But I think there are enough concerns here. I, for one, this is a totally different project than I was involved in 10 years ago. I was involved in it when we looked at 29 units that were going to be affordable housing units to what essentially is kind of a project setup that we have now with townhouses that are all rentals. And I wouldn't have supported that if I thought 10 years later that's what it was going to end up being. But I think we, maybe that's our only option, but I don't think we should be dictated by state funds and dictating how that's going to be set up. I think that's a bit unfair to ask the community to accept it that way, because that's the best deal we could do. We're not working for the best deal for the person who's the nonprofit agency. We're working for the best deal for the town of Westport and the residents of the town of Westport. But again, Brian, you wanted to be heard on this, I'll give you an opportunity to be heard, and Warren, if you do, and then we'll move on.
Just very quickly through the chair.
Yeah.
Through the chair, very quickly, to address Mr. Sullivan's concerns with regards to taxes.
Grab that mic.
Those were not our figures or TCB's. Those were provided to you, and the assessment was done by our assessor's office using the state and state criteria. So those figures, whether they spent, I think, $50 million, it would be based again on the income and the value generated by the income of the project.
you see the parity though, Brian.
Well, I understand,
Judging an
but
enterprise.
that's
let me
a
finish.
state issue, not a
Judging an
local issue.
enterprise, I know, that's why I said it's not necessarily just Nokichoke, it's a systemic problem. When I see that we're judging a nonprofit enterprise on its profits, it doesn't make sense.
Exactly, and, we have nonprofits in the town of Westport here that own, millions of dollars, multi-millions of dollars of property, for which they pay no taxes. So what we did as a negotiating committee, which Mr. Spurlett was on, we said this is unacceptable. When we got those figures as a negotiating committee, Mr. Healy was on it, Mr. Spurlett was on it, I was on it. We said this is unacceptable. How can we get more in taxes? Because this isn't going to fly for the select board. So we entered into negotiations and we set a minimum that would be due in lieu of taxes on a yearly basis. And that was the $22,000 figure, which was roughly double the amount that would be paid in actual taxes by the developer for the property under the local assessment based on the state criteria.
Which is 25%
Exactly.
of the tax value, so it's not the typical real estate bill.
Exactly, and we I know
Dick was concerned, we were shocked. We said, no, this is unacceptable. With regards to the rental units, I'm going to try to address a couple of them. Again, we were on the negotiating committee. When the RFP came in, when the response came in from TCB, it was clear that this project was going to be a rental project. There was no illusion past the review of their response, which was the 3-ring binder that we all looked at. And we recommended the awarding of the RFP to the select board based on the fact that they've, after many visits to their other projects, after a review of their, the quality of the work that had been done and the impact and recommendations of other communities, that this was going to be a quality project. Ideally, I think 6 years ago, when I became involved, or somewhere around that point, the vision was for 54 units with a mix of rental and ownership units. Because of the state criteria, and the rental units, if there are rental units that are affordable, the quota, the number of units that go towards the credit goes up. There's, again, another DHCD rule that would have allowed that to be beneficial. The RFP came in, it did not provide for that. The project did provide, however, for the units in a makeup that was very, very substantial to the project that the original committee that I believe you would have been involved in prior to my time envisioned. So that project moved forward, the project moved forward on that end. Again, that step was seen by the select board. I don't believe you were there, and the bodies have changed over the years. The negotiating committee worked through town council, which was Copeland and Page, to negotiate the best possible purchase agreement for the town. The negotiating committee, and Dick was there. You know, it was very difficult times dealing with responses from both our town council and I believe their council. And we finally got the purchase agreement to you folks for review. That was again done with Copeland and Page. There hasn't been any agreement that hasn't been reviewed by town council. In conjunction with that, you'd also remember there were presentations with regards to the purchase agreement that were made in conjunction with town council and Dick and the town administrator. The next step was, we've got a signed purchase agreement. They're going to apply, or they had applied for low-income tax credits. They knew going in, and we were told that they were not going to get them and almost never get them on the first round. It was simply to get the one-stop application in the door. The next step, my understanding would be that they were going to be applying this fall for the second round based on the purchase agreement and the expanded site control issues. As a board, a board member of both the Housing Partnership Committee and a trustee, I have not seen an application, a Mass Works application for $1.9 million. I'm unaware of that.
Jack, why
we had a meeting last week.
Jack, why was that sent for us for signature then? And why was the rush put on urgency for it?
I don't know, I thought it was just a document that was sent to us. I don't know that it was sent to us.
I was under the impression, and I thought I told you about it, I said I would sign it, but I'd like to see the details.
My impression was like $900,000
$900,000.
application for infrastructure.
That's what I thought.
Yeah.
Well, when I saw, the day that we had.
But you don't, do you know about the
it had range from
900,000?
900
We did.
Okay.
We
all
were
right.
aware of a program, because you were at the same presentation, where TCB had stated that, it was here, that,
By the way, in that presentation, he said very clearly that that was the first time that I heard it, that he abandoned the idea of having the high-end houses as part of the mix, the more affordable houses as part of the mix. Those more affordable houses, I never was under the impression that they were going to be rentals. I thought they were going to be ownership.
the purchase agreement, or the
was the
RFP
same
response, the RFP response was clear with regards to ownership, that these were going to be rental, because they were relying upon the low-income tax credits.
They've been
for
at the
project.
response, but the first time he mentioned that was at that meeting, and it's on tape, that before the Board of Selectmen, making the presentation, saying he had to abandon that because he couldn't come up with a business model.
He was not abandoning home ownership. He was abandoning the upper tier of market.
Of market units.
Yes, and we pushed back and said.
We said, no, that's
"It's unacceptable." we want to maintain the income mix that was in the RFP.
And it's in the purchase agreement.
Yep.
And so it wasn't, there was never any, in fact, the response to the RFP was explicit. There was never any ownership mentioned in that. So the document that,
What was the response, the never.
the request for
mentioned-
proposals.
The request
that
for
was-
proposal had ownership all over.
It had ownership and rental units.
The only bid that came in suggested that this would only work if they did total rentals, is what you're saying.
Exactly.
That's a little different.
Exactly.
That's a little different.
Well,
If we're saying and/or as a request, the assumption was, up until the request for proposals, we were looking for and/or.
correct, but the purchase agreement that was negotiated, and signed by the select board, and the response, more importantly,
It wasn't
the,
negotiated by the select board. We were given the information, the same way we were given the Mass Works. It talked about the details would be followed, but this is the overview. When we saw the overview, it's a little bit different than when we got the details.
well, on the negotiating committee was myself, Mr. Spurlett, and the town administrator, Mr. Dutra.
Did you negotiate
Yes, he
all
did.
rentals?
It was,
I don't recall,
it
because
was-
I came in towards the end of it, but.
It wasn't,
whatever.
that wasn't a point of negotiation.
No.
Because the response that was approved by you, the award of the project that you gentlemen made was based on the binder that was reviewed with you gentlemen, and it was explicit within that agreement that this was going to be a rental project. In fact, there were questions fielded by TCB from the board and from us with regards to the breakdown on the income levels. And that was very important, that we maintain the income levels. So for this to be a rental project shouldn't have been a surprise, because that, we're talking about almost 2 years.
Let me present it a different way. Would you be willing to go back to talk to TCB about the possibility of having some ownership as part of the townhouses, so they're not all rentals?
I'm an appointee, and my job is to do what is the pleasure of your board. What I think would be helpful, though, at this point, because this confusion seems to keep coming up, what I'd like to do, is have a joint meeting between the select board and our board and TCB.
Yeah.
To see where they are on their timeline, to air these issues once and for all, because frankly, we don't have the control to do
Well, that's
that.
what the public hearing was all about, wasn't it? I mean,
No.
It was to have the neighbors have input. They got input from the neighbors. If they wanted to take some of that input, they'd go back and make some revisions based on the input from the neighbors. Otherwise, why have the neighbors
I
participate?
don't know why that was done, other than to tell the folks where it was and to make sure that everyone was kept apprised of the process. During this whole process, you've attended a couple, different members of the select board have made sure they're there. We've had our own community outreach meetings in preparation for the RFP, where the details for the RFP were aired. We had community outreach meetings once the TCB project came in to talk about the details of the project. Some have been very well
Okay,
attended,
then why
others
don't-
have not.
Then why don't we just schedule a
So I
meeting
think
for
if we-
affordable housing,
Sure, a
and
jo-
TCB, and we'll do it at the earliest. Are you gonna be at the next meeting?
No, no.
So we'll do it 2 meetings.
Again, but just,
So all of these things that are coming up now, Mr. Vieira, I know they're a concern, but at least in my mind, they shouldn't be. Because we cannot work in a vacuum. Everything that we do is sent through your office, and is sent, either through the then town administrator, Mike, or through Jack. And then ultimately, the votes are taken by you gentlemen. We're not contracting at all. We're simply doing the legwork and doing the other work.
That's
And with
why we're
regards to
having
the-
this discussion, because
Yes.
I've been asked to sign off some things that I'm very uncomfortable with at this point.
I'm very uncomfortable with the 1.9 million also, because I've got to tell you, I have not seen that document.
It's a range, it's not 1.9.
Up to 1.9.
But we had a meeting last week.
But
and-
the
and-
range, but the range that they're asking for has in their business model, and I assume you've seen their business model, has 1.9 coming from Mass Works.
And personally, that Mass Works project grant was not part of their response to our request for a proposal. So you understand that?
Yep.
And, personal feelings aside, support was given to the select board or to up to 900,000. And that was gonna handle not sewer treatment off-site or water off-site, but my understanding was it was gonna be utilized to build the infrastructure of the interior roadway and for work on the on-site sewage treatment system. The original plans,
Actually, I think it's the reverse.
Water and sewer.
I think it's the reverse, so I think the higher figure was whether it was on
But
site, and
no.
the lesser figure was.
we have
going
not
out.
taken a vote as a board, as a trust, or the Housing Partnership Committee to support that venture.
No, we haven't.
We haven't had, we weren't even in, I didn't even know you were being asked to sign it. We haven't seen a copy of this contract. In fact, we just had a meeting, and we have
Who
not
asked us to
seen it.
sign that document?
Lower.
Tony?
What's that?
The lower number is the on-site number is the $1.9 million.
Right, that's what I said.
The off-site was.
Yeah, I know.
Okay.
You were trying to correct me, but I know
We-
I was
we have
right. I
not-
didn't want to double check.
Who
None
asked
nonetheless.
us to sign that
I mean, it
document?
stands to reason. If you're gonna do something on site, if you're gonna tie into a system, tying into the system should be less expensive.
Right.
But it's not.
Without
Tony, are
doubt,
you
there's no
clear
question.
on who asked?
So, excuse me, who asked, I asked
No,
Jack
no.
that earlier.
No, are you clear on who asked us to sign that
No,
document?
I asked Jack.
No.
Question, because I thought it came from Mass.
No.
Do we know who asked us to sign that
I think,
talked to people in committee.
TCB, I think it came up before this board. I think they came before this board. They said that this is what we propose. We think we can do a little bit better in terms of the market, increasing the market share. If we can go for a Mass Works grant, it's going to take a quick turnaround time. And I think
And that was two meeting,
but that was a meeting of this board,
Select board.
not the Housing Partnership.
but we haven't been presented, just to be clear, I want this board to understand this, we have not been presented with that document. The first, I sat there and went,
Diane, who gave you
So-
the document to be signed? And asked if it was time sensitive, we needed to get it signed right away to get the application in.
I think it was Leonardi, I think.
Leonardi?
Yeah.
So he works for you. So I'd start off with talking to Leonardi.
but
We-
what
we
I'm saying is,
received-
we have not, that might have been presented to him for transfer to you folks, but we haven't taken a
Well,
vote, we haven't seen it.
He works for you, right?
Sure.
Leonardi sent us an email on Thursday asking if we have it signed by Friday. We didn't have a meeting the following week and wanted to wait till the following week, and we were told it was too late. So I asked for authority from the board to get this forward, so we wouldn't delay it. I'd sign it, and I wanted to see the details. I finally saw the details this week, and that's why I'm raising these
Is the
questions.
only support we've given, my understanding is for 900,000.
Yeah.
1.9 million,
No, I haven't seen that one.
I have not seen. I have
It was
not
in
seen
last
that.
week's packet.
Okay.
Can I make one point?
So,
We asked that all boards that submit contracts to us for signature, which you're telling us you haven't, have those contracts in their possession of all the members of that committee, I don't know, 7 days? Is that what we said? 7 days. So they have ample time to give that review, consideration, and thoughtful analysis, so that when we're presented
Without
with a
doubt.
request, so I don't think that happened in this case.
no, I don't, and because more importantly, we foreclosed, when I came on the board, just so you understand, the issue with regards to connecting to the water and sewer system of Dartmouth had been foreclosed. That had been, the prior chair and a member of the select board had been part of that negotiating committee prior to me being appointed many years ago. So we never explored the option of having that done. We were asked at various times by different, at different on-sites and in different occasions, whether that was going to be available. And we emphasized in the RFP and in all of the documents that you gentlemen have seen, that that was not an option. That if they were interested in doing that, the developer would have to do that on their own. That our plan or our vision for the project as a board utilized a denitrification system and an on-site public water supply. So those are the things that we had asked about.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
and that's consistent with what Sharon has said here in answer to question 3. The question being, and has there been any contact with Dartmouth on the potential for a water and sewer connection? Answer from Sharon, it is my understanding that TCP did discuss the sewer and water connection permits with the town of Dartmouth. I am not aware of the outcome of such discussions.
Well, the attorney may not be, but I'm aware because I signed a document that was requested and immediately had to be signed and forwarded. In that document on page 2, it talks about the amount of funds requested, $818,884 to $1.998404, with parentheses. Please refer to attached preliminary cost estimates for details for Nokichoke Village. I've been asking for that, I finally got a copy of that. In those details, it spells out the 1.9 is not only required, but in the handout that we saw in the presentation that was made at the McNamara School, it says the proposed development of 50 units of affordable rental housing is dependent upon the public infrastructure in order to proceed. The site currently contains no infrastructure, and a Mass Work infrastructure grant financing and the construction of roads, sidewalks, wastewater treatment would greatly reduce the site's construction costs and allow the development to become economically feasible. And it became pretty clear to me, looking at their proposal, if this wasn't available to them, they're going to be on a $14 million budget, they're going to be out considerably, and probably couldn't
No,
go
and
forward.
that was, if you remember, that was the meeting before the select board where they first brought up the mass development grants. And I believe you very, very astutely asked the question, is the project done without it? And they said no.
Right.
Well,
So, you know,
That's not what they said in this.
Yeah, and
understood.
And I'm not going to, because some of this is new to us as well, but the pushback that we gave them when, based on the presentation that was made here 5 or 6 weeks ago, was they had eliminated the market rate rentals. And
We said no.
we said no.
Right.
They said, well, we think we can fill that gap with Mass Works money, and we put that back in.
Yep.
So obviously, what's happened is the gap has grown. Because, you know, I mean, I
From the
reckon.
900,000,
Yeah, I rec- I-
816,000.
the presentation we had here was the 900,000. It was, with that grant money would put back into the housing mix, and the 10 units that were market rate. And that was in the presentation again this past week, but it was assuming a higher level of funding. That pro forma has never been to the Affordable Housing Trust Board.
Mr. Chair, can I suggest that we request that the Affordable Housing Trust go back, look at what we just saw the other night. I would like to, first of all, I'd like to have them ratify, if they haven't already done so, ratify their request to us to sign that Mass Works grant, number one. Number two, I would like the moving parts for this project to stop, because we have a P&S. Now, there must be some understanding about what level of funding, and maybe this is what they gave us the other night, maybe that's what it is, $14 million. At some level, they have the funding they need, and they can go forward. And they will not be asking us to grant any more or sign any more applications on their behalf, because it's not part of the P&S. I don't think we have that.
You're going,
correct.
you're going too far with your motion. She'll never be able to write all that stuff down, and I don't know how anybody's gonna vote on parts of it. So,
If I could
I think,
suggest-
I think what we're gonna do is, we're gonna ask you to come back a month from now. Do what you need to do. You've heard the concerns tonight. You know, this isn't about,
It is.
in my opinion, I think this is healthy discussion. We could agree to disagree on some issues here, but I think we have to recognize some of the concerns that are out there. And do what you can, come back. These are the kinds of questions we're gonna be addressing. We'll invite the public to come in as well, and they can have some discussion as well in terms of how they see this, you know. I don't think we're gonna solve anything tonight.
No, I
Rehashing the
don't,
same
I don't
stuff.
either, Tony. I think what would be helpful and what I'd really like to, I'm not the chair or the vice chair, I think they're ill this evening. And I was asked to come on very short notice, that's why I'm not wearing a suit tonight. So, what I'd like to do is, we're gonna have a meeting within this month. Our monthly meeting's gonna be there. What I'd like to do is,
Well, if
possibly schedule
we're
a joint meeting.
If we're directing you,
Yes.
I would like to direct you to have a meeting, you know, within the next week, to discuss some of what you heard here tonight. Have Craig, something that's available to Craig, and then be
Yeah,
prepared,
do
because you
that.
can probably have to have 2 or 3 meetings before you come back to us, because we're not here trying to tell you how to do that. But if you're gonna ask me to sign off, you're gonna need to know. Very few things I'm gonna sign off moving forward on this until we get some better
I would
answers.
like, yeah, I haven't seen the document that was presented to you, and I'd like a clarification on that also. What I'd also like to do is, because I think we can short circuit and kind of solve the process where we're not trying to come in every week or every 2 weeks to do these things. Possibly I'd suggest, if at the pleasure of the chair, a meeting be scheduled between the Affordable Housing Trust and the full select board, where we could sit, work with Jack, all be in the same room, and then bring our joint concerns to TCB. Because having a meeting like this and trying to do it very quickly versus a working meeting with all the members of the select board becomes very difficult. And we all have the same
We'll have a
goal.
working meeting on this issue, we'll schedule it.
Yeah, we can do it, we can do it, I'm sure, an executive, because,
Can't, is it
I
required?
don't think it should be executive. I think this is something that everybody should have an opportunity to.
well,
Well, yeah.
if what Brian is suggesting is an approach where you also want to have a negotiating position with TCB, you can have that in public. But I'm suggesting if you wanted to meet first, as a group, to create a bargaining position and to identify the issues, then you could do that in executive. If you have no interest in doing that, we should have the whole meeting in public.
I would like it all in public, Craig, because I think there's at least a misunderstanding among people in terms of what we're doing, and I think the more we can keep it public, the better we can minimize any
Well, there are
misunderstandings.
no secrets, and I think as long as we can all get on the same page once and for all, it'll benefit all of us. So if,
We'll schedule it.
yeah, and I know it's Catherine Williams is the chair, so
Yep.
Diane knows how to contact her. I'm just here
Okay, thanks.
holding the water. Thanks.
Maureen, did you have a comment or statement, or I'd like to,
I'd just like to
okay,
clarify
like Bill, sure.
for your board, with regard to what transpired.
I don't want to do that tonight. If that's, I'd rather do that next
Only on
meeting.
the water issue, because I think it's part of the consideration.
Okay, go ahead.
You'll recall way back when we were together starting the project with Nokochoke Village.
Right.
That water and sewer was a big concern.
Yes.
And we were either gonna have
Still
to
is.
build a treatment plant that was nitrogen sensitive, given the fact Nokochoke River is right there, the wetland is there, Forge Pond is there, so they were legitimate concerns. And we were looking for Dartmouth to tie in, to be able to tie in with the sewage discharge in the pump station to pump it up to them. And consideration came back that the development at Lincoln Park was going to eat up more than of the New Bedford sewage treatment facility that the New Bedford could even handle or allow to be pumped into them. So that meant that Lincoln Park wasn't going to even be able to build out their expectations and pump into the facilities over in New Bedford. And they were looking for possibly taking part of Lincoln Park and pumping it down into Nokochoke Village with a tertiary treatment facility that their usage of it would help us to be able to support that kind of a treatment facility. That's where all this came about, and then it finally come back, no way, New Bedford wasn't gonna accept
Yeah,
it, and it
we-
couldn't be done. So that's why it got into the iffing of what direction you're gonna go, and it came back into self-contained treatment facilities on site for Nokochoke Village. There was no other way to go.
But now it's going back the other way.
If there's a possibility,
Right.
I'd like to explore it again because of the change over in Lincoln Park.
Right.
But I don't know.
Well, you're
whether it's going to-
you're on the Housing Affordable Trust
Yeah.
Council, and the proposal that came before us had that in there, and that's why we're questioning. So if we're doing it, fine, but we're not aware that we had such discussions. Jack had not had any conversations with anybody from Dartmouth on water or sewage. And we're asked to write a proposal and sign off on it for 1.9 million, and we're just kind of a little curious about what we're signing off on. We have a responsibility as a board to ask that question.
I was, Mr. Chairman, as were other members of the trust, under the impression that town council and Attorney Sharin had been working knowledgeably with the Board of Selectmen, and that you people
Well,
are all aware.
you heard differently.
Now I,
Okay.
yes, but now I uphold the fact that we should have a joint meeting, whether it's an executive session or otherwise.
It's not going to be open,
That-
and we'll
that
schedule,
would be
we'll let you
fine.
know. Okay.
I myself would like to see it in executive session to have an agreement as to the direction that the town, to the town's benefit would go, and then have the meeting with the public to
Well,
explain the
it'll be decided by the board,
possibilities.
but you know my position on it, I'd like to see it open.
Well, either way, but we do have to have a meeting to try and figure this all out.
Okay, I'm going to recognize Bill, and I'd like to get on with the agenda.
Thank you.
Thank you, Warren.
Hi, Bill Harkins. I was at the meeting at Mackinber School as well, and there were a lot of local residents who were unhappy with the proposal as stated, and I believe that with the initial plan, that there were supposed to be single units that were going to be for sale, and there was no rentals or very few rentals going in there. With all the changes that have gone on, I don't believe that the taxpayers of this town, the voters, have been notified of what's been happening, and it's my feeling that we need to come up with some agenda item that we can put on for a vote for town going forward, because I would think that the people of the town would like to have a voice in whether it is all rental units or whether it is units for sale. And also at that meeting, yes, they did, they said that septic systems were not going to be able to tie into Dartmouth because of the way the system was set up. That was definitely part of that. Water, they're still trying to work in negotiation with Dartmouth to connect to water, which would help them considerably with the areas, being protected from the septic systems. And that's basically it, but I'd like to see something come up to give the town more say in how we proceed with this.
I share your concern, but I think other board members, I think what we agreed to do is at least talk to the affordable housing folks and see what areas we can still express some concern about and address in some of these details. Maybe it's not off the table to look at some purchase. And at some point, I would agree that if we've gone down this road, at least we need to be a bit more open, and maybe open's unfair to say, because I don't think the housing committee was trying to keep it secretive, but I don't think the average person, certainly the abutters that were at that meeting, were not under the impression.
We're not
I get
aware
that
of it at
sense as
all.
well. And as you can see, there are members of the boards that were still confused because we thought we were still doing some purchase. And I honestly still think you can with townhouses. I mean, I don't know that that's going to dramatically change a business model. If you get 50 units and you identify 10 for purchase purposes and you work out a model financially for that, I don't see how that's going to break the deal one way or the other. I think what's going to break the deal is if we can't abide by everything the state wants us to do, which is developing more at the state level, and takes the control away from the local town. This whole idea of developing these kinds of projects was so we wouldn't be subject to 40Bs and developers would come in and do whatever they wanted to. Looks like we're ending up with that anyways, as a community. But enough, we gotta get on.
Okay.
Are we all set for that? Everybody set it? Okay, thank you, folks. Next on the agenda are appointments. First, we have Carol Doobie for the Cultural Council. Carol? Irene?
Yes, she is not able to be in town. She had a professional conference to attend, but I did want to speak for the members. She has made contact with us. We think we're very fortunate to have someone with her background, eager and willing. She is a parent in the town. She brings some wonderful perspectives, so we're delighted. And we just had 24 applications for our fabulous $4,250. We're struggling with distributing the money adequately and fairly, and so having an additional member is a wonderful opportunity, and I hope you will look positively on her application. I also want to encourage the townspeople to realize that you have allowed us to increase our membership by 2, and we most welcome people from all corners of the community who have an interest and commitment to the cultural, historical, scientific community, and to help us respond in lots of great ways. So thank you.
I make a motion that we appoint Carolyn Doobie to the Westport Cultural Council.
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Chair votes aye, it's unanimous, and we welcome Carol.
Just going back to that now, you said there's 2 more openings on that board? Are you saying you have 2 more openings?
We have now for
Now-
two more?
No, I don't know, I'm asking you.
I'm sorry.
Do we have, how many more openings are still on that board?
We have 2 more, because
okay.
you allowed us to bring it up. Okay. And we welcome any and all applicants, so please spread the word.
Okay.
Thank you.
And next to the appointment, and we have Board of Registrar, and we have a letter in our packet recommending Joshua Brum to that position. Joshua is here. Joshua, do you want to come up, please? I can't find the letter.
Right here.
I know we received it. There we go. This is a letter from the town clerk, and after interviewing 2 candidates, their recommendation is Joshua Brum of 44 Blossom Road. He's with us this evening, and both candidates were excellent, but they made a decision to recommend Josh based on his background and the needs that they presently have in that office. Do you want to say a little bit by way of introduction to the
I've
board?
worked at the library for the last 7 years. I love working for the town. I love the library. This is a great opportunity, so I couldn't really pass it up.
You're a town resident also?
Yes, yeah.
I'll make a motion that we approve Joshua Brum for the Board of Registrars.
Second.
Just by way of answering your question, Dick, not only is he a town resident, but I think he's going to be missed by the library quite a bit. Because I know for one, he's done
Yeah.
all kinds of volunteer work and support for library
right.
services in
I'll
our
still be
town.
helping out there quite a bit.
You heard that,
I
Sue?
was trying to embarrass you into that a little bit because we need your help.
No, I definitely will be.
Motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Chair votes aye, it's unanimous. Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. There you go.
Congratulations.
Good luck.
Thank you.
Okay, and wouldn't you know, the next action item is a request from Susan Branco from the library director, posting of upcoming principal clerk's position. Please.
Why?
Okay, thank you. Joshua has been filling a 25-hour plus 8-hour-a-week position at the library for the past 7 years. This is one of 2 principal clerk positions that is shared by another 20-hour-a-week clerk. He plans to stay at the library through the end of December, so we'd like to advertise his position to begin January 2nd or as soon after that as possible.
So this is just to advertise that position within house, right?
Yes, correct.
Okay. I'll make a motion that we allow the library director, Sue Branco, to advertise that position within town employees.
Second.
Any comments, discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Chair votes aye, it's unanimous.
Now, the other thing, if in fact no one from in town, who's already an employee of the town applies for this job, then do we need another motion for her to go out and advertise? We might as well do that now and get it over with.
So moved.
Are you seconding the motion that
Yeah.
he made for you?
Yeah,
Okay,
whatever.
we have motion and second.
I asked it as a
Hearing no
question.
discussion, all those in favor?
Aye.
Chair votes aye.
I asked it as a question, I wasn't, figuring.
Thank you.
Okay,
Yep,
thank you
keep up the
very
good work.
much.
This way, save your time.
Okay, good. Thank you very much.
Next is municipal bid auction follow-up. Diane or Jack, who's speaking on this?
Diane, go ahead.
As a follow-up to the last meeting, the motion was to see if we could go out and better the bids that we received originally for municipal bids. And we pulled 2 different recycling companies. Both came in below what we was offered through municipal bid.
So the best deal for the town is still with the
It's still with
bid auction
Bridgewater.
price.
In addition, I think we would have to pay them to haul it, and the municipal bid is going to assume that cost of hauling.
So I think Steve was suggesting that he would still like to get a vote of the board. We kind of voted if we didn't get a better price, then go out with a bid, but let's formalize that with a vote if we could.
Sure.
So I'd entertain a motion to go with the municipal bid for those items.
So,
Motion and second.
Second.
Steve, Craig made the motion and Mike the second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Chair votes aye, it's unanimous. Approval letter was.
Just one thing before we go,
Yes.
I know it's all set. One of the only things, when I saw this, and I don't want to be latest anymore, but we reached out to a New Bedford scrap dealer, yet we have 3 licensed major scrap dealers in our town, well, Mid-City, A&E, and XL, and, I mean, I think we should at least, I'm very,
Oh, I thought they did that as well.
no, well, I'm just going by what I read here. So what I'm saying is, anytime we can do something, I want to do something for the town. In other words, let's use our resources that we have in the town.
I think
businesses in town.
Steve actually did that.
Okay.
I think the reply came back from the Bedford, but I think he reached out to all of them.
Okay, that was just my concern.
That was my understanding.
Well,
He's-
Mid-City,
he's not
too.
here tonight.
Mid-City's in there.
Mid-City's,
Mid-City's here, yeah, I have no problem with that.
The others, yeah.
I'm saying, we got another one, but
2 others.
I don't want to delay
I
it.
think he reached out to everybody. I think those are the 2 responses.
Okay,
if I recall.
that's okay.
I think you reached out to the two that could handle vehicles also.
Yep.
I don't think the other 2 are allowed to take vehicles.
Oh, they
Any-
are.
Any qualified within the town, our policy is we try to go with town as much and support town businesses.
Support town businesses.
And I'm assuming he's doing that. He certainly has on everything else, so.
Mm-hmm.
Next is approval letter to be sent to all Class 2 licenses.
I make a motion that, because that was the one that was done over by the Attorney General that came in here. This is the letter you're
Yep.
talking about, and
Yep.
I'll support this. Make a motion that we endorse this letter and distribute to all the used car dealers in Westport.
Second.
Okay, any questions on this?
Just that we are limited with the urge, limitation on urge. We say we urge you to use this as a model. 'Cause that's not wording for in our letter, is it?
This letter came from the Attorney General.
Oh, we're urging them to use this contract. They don't have to,
That's
but
what I'm
we're
getting at.
urging them to use it.
That's
This
what I'm
is a
getting at.
standard
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry, yeah. So we'll just make that part of the motion.
That is a limitation.
Sorry.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Chair votes aye, it's unanimous. Next is a request from Chris Gonzalez to extend his vacation time because of everybody trying to get Chris to do things 7 days a week, I
Yeah.
guess.
That's it. And I heartily recommend this to the board, and I can't say enough about the work he's done in the last couple of months on Beach Ave and Bauer Ave.
I make a motion that we grant Chris Gonzalez carry over his vacation. I mean, let's just do it to the end of the year, but at this point, it is either use it or lose it. It won't go beyond July 1st, so it's his choice.
Second.
Yeah, by the end of the year.
I mean, January 1st, right. In other words, he has to use it this calendar year, and if not, well, he loses it.
Motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Chair votes aye, it's unanimous. Approval of minutes for regular meeting on October 15th.
I was absent, so I have no input.
Well, this will be an easy one.
I was gonna say, that's why we got out early that night, didn't we? I thought so,
We
yeah.
did get out early that
Yeah.
night.
Okay, I'd entertain a motion on the minutes.
I make a motion to accept the minutes.
So, second.
Any questions on the minutes? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Chair votes aye, and 1 abstention, Michael, who wasn't at the meeting. That went by pretty fast,
Yeah.
Michael. I don't want to say anything, but,
Yeah.
you know, it did.
But you were surely
Okay,
missed.
question and answer period. John, would you mind seeing if there's any information out there, question and answer?
I think there
When
is
John's
one
doing
question.
that, it's not on the agenda, but a meeting at 4 o'clock today, we had this, we've been working with the Buzzards Bay group and on a stormwater discharge, and in your packet, you have a little handout that's by way of information. So I would like to, what they're suggesting is, it really should be coming out through the Board of Selectmen, and Water Resources already looked at this, but I didn't want it to come out through the Water Resource Management Committee. It should be something from the board as well. So I'd ask you to take a look at this. They're prepared to go forward with it. They were going to do it independently, but I said, no, I think it should be coming before the board. So you can see they put the board on here. And I think it's, basically it's being endorsed by all groups in town, and it's an informational piece that may help to, Bill was at the meeting today, and Jack was as well. I think it helps from the homeowner's standpoint. It tells the town what we're doing. We have on our town meeting an easement article. This addresses what we're doing with the easements and how we're trying to deal with stormwater, so. Anybody have any questions on this?
And they've agreed to make 200 copies?
They're gonna make 200 copies if we're interested.
Available.
So if people are comfortable with it, what I'd like to do is give them the okay to do that. But I didn't want to do that with putting the board's name on it without at least a discussion with board on it.
Move to release for distribution.
Okay? Get a second?
Second.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
3 of us, and Dick's out of the room right now, but we're gonna move on. And we do have a question. George has a question. Why, if you can't answer, has the local station program numbers been changed to 190, 191, and 192 instead of 15, 16, 17, and 18? It was done after the contract was signed. George, I don't want to get into the discussion they did, and they notified the town on this a long time ago. My wife had, and she doesn't watch any of these, but she has that memorized for the number of phone calls we've got on it. But for some reason, our chair of that committee is Steve Willett. For some reason, it was necessary to make those changes. I'm sure there's a valid reason. I couldn't answer that tonight, though, unless anybody else could.
Well, the reason I'm doing this is because I have phone calls also. And I think we are not working for Charter. Charter is working for us, number one.
Could we delay it, and maybe you could give Steve a call, we could address it at the next meeting?
Well, if you look at this, let me just give you this so you have some information. This is what they passed out to our people previous to, or after the charter contract was made. And I chaired the charter committee, not the charter committee, the town committee for 10 years as the, when we were going into a contract with them. And we asked them for many things, and they gave them to us. But this, I think, if you look at Dartmouth, New Bedford, Fairhaven, Fall River, people like to go from, we'll say in our case, Channel 10, local, to let's see what's on cable. Instead of going all the way up to 191, 190, it's just, and then the print. And the way it comes out, we're in a group of nothing. And they haven't even put it in here on the basic service. It goes 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12.
I'll tell you what I'll do.
Yes.
I'll bring this up before the chair, which is Mr. Willett, and the other selectman who's out of the room right now is also on that committee, Mr. Spillett. I'll talk to him about that this evening and see if we can have an answer for you at the next meeting. I couldn't answer it tonight.
And I think
all I can know is I get those 3 memorized. I can tell you what's on those stations now.
Well, it bothered me because I'm on one of them now for an hour, and I don't know if anybody's watching.
Oh,
okay. But I appreciate that. But
Okay.
I think for the citizens, again, they had nothing to do with and we just received a $5 increase, and we can't do much about that. But I think we can do something about getting our channels back locally. like Fall
Well,
River.
there may be a logical reason, and I assume there is, but we can just speculate tonight without answering
And
it.
they're not even being used for anything if you look on the.
Presently.
Yes, sir.
Presently, they're not.
Oh, all right, I'll
You
go
know.
back to the camera right now.
Well, thank you, sir. I appreciate that.
All right, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, George.
The town administrator's report. Jack?
Yeah,
You're
so-
interfering with a baseball game now, so.
Yeah, very quickly.
Watching now.
Over the past 2 weeks, I've worked on the following items in addition to the day-to-day administrative and personnel matters. Stormwater management projects, wrapped up the middle school project for the year. It'll be completed next summer. Tony's told you about the Drift Road project. Steve Lombard and I met with acting superintendent of schools, Ann Doggan, to review next year's numbers, to assist her and the school committee in budget development. The moderator and I videotaped a discussion and explanation of the warrant articles on for the November 5th special. I also prepared the handout explanation to voters, which is attached to my report. Beach Ave update. I walked the road with Elaine Ostroff to further discuss options for handicapped access to the beach. Tony Vieira and I met with John Leonard and discussed enforcement of parking restrictions. The police chief also requested additional signage.
I'll stop there just for a sec,
sure.
Jack. John Leonard met with us. We have a letter in our packet from John asking, his concern is public safety. He lives pretty much where the handicap turnaround is right now, and concern going forward what the town's plans were. We talked to him. Very nice gentleman, and I think certainly represents the Harbor folks, an example of the type of people down there. And I think John is just concerned from a public safety standpoint going forward. And we assured him that we're going to work on this. We're not just opening up a road and forgetting about it. But past history suggests that when the road was open, that not a lot of neglect took place. So he wanted to hear that with us and make sure that we want to continue that.
We talked about trying to do the same Cherry and Webb model, if you will, in terms of having somebody who might be retired that would want to take on a little job of handing out tickets to people.
Think of anybody?
I don't know. So let me see. Let's see. Steve Lombard and I attended the Capital Improvement Planning Committee meeting to secure a vote recommending favorable action on the water treatment bond issue article. They did. I also spent time on furthering discussion on water treatment options with DEP and exploring plant locations. I visited DOT in Taunton to get plans of the Route 6 area.
And before you leave that, Jack met, and Bill did, some people from the Water Resource Management people met with the environmental partners today related to the Fall River water issues and water treatment options. And that was taped, and it's on air. It'll be played 4 or 5 times between now and town meeting. So if anybody's got any questions on the treatment plant and facility, they can hear directly from the environmental partners in terms of how we got to this point, where we're going, that kind of situation.
Yeah, Tony and I will be going over Wednesday to talk with Terry Sullivan to further concerns here. As you know, Steve Lombard and I pressed the town accountant to produce the balance sheet, and DOR sent out a representative to review it on Thursday, the balance sheet on Thursday, October 24th. By noon on the following day, Friday the 25th, we had received the hard copy certification of our free cash figures. And I attached the certification. It's $1,200,784. I recommend that the board vote to recommend to the town meeting that $451,510.37 be transferred from free cash to fund the award of the JLMC arbitration panel. It's called for under Article 1 of the special town meeting warrant. This will leave $749,273.63 in free cash. I have also attached information on local receipts and turnbacks, which, as you will see, represent most of the free cash. Please note, health insurance turnback is unusually high because of the 13th month payment found by the auditors last year. It will not be there next year. As you all know, the remaining free cash should be used to fund capital items such as vehicles, the COA roof, the police station roof, and air quality system. We face unknown school building costs in the future, as well as ongoing PCB cleanup costs. Free cash and overlay surplus should not be used to prop up operational budgets. They should be used for capital items or placed in the stabilization fund.
I'd like to stop you there for a minute. I would entertain action by the board on recommending where the funds would come for the police arbitration settlement for retro pay, and I would leave it at that. Jack's got his recommendation to use the $451,510.37 to come from, transfer from free cash as opposed to stabilization.
I move that we recommend at the town meeting that $451,510.37 be transferred from free cash to pay the JMLC arbitration award for retroactive pay.
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Jack, would you pass this information on to the
Yes, sir.
Finance Committee tomorrow night?
Yes, I
They
will.
certainly have to weigh in on their own recommendation, but that would be our request that that's how we do the funding. And we are responsible for submitting the warrant, so up until today, we could never do that because we didn't have a certified free cash figure. Now that we have it, that's how we're recommending as a board.
Can I just ask one thing?
Yes.
Just, I don't know if it's clarification. You said, and the remaining free, as you know, the remaining free cash should be used for capital items. I agree 100%, such as vehicles and what. But Council on Aging roof, wouldn't that building qualify for CPC money?
I don't know.
Okay, that's, I think it would.
Yeah, we're not at the point where.
No, we're not quite, but I'm just saying, it was in there, I'm just,
We haven't even looked at the operating
No, that's
budgets
right.
yet.
No.
You know, I don't, having a structural deficit hasn't gone away with certifying free cash.
That's
So
correct.
we still get some issues from carrying forward from last year.
Yeah.
We're gonna have to address
Yeah.
where that money's gonna come from. So we may end up, this isn't the first time that we use this, even though we have a policy to say we don't do this, we've got to make some decisions. We're either going to be dealing with layoffs in this town, or we're going to have to come up with other sources to deal with this. So we may do a combination of those before we're all done.
Right, and Steve and I will be talking to you next meeting, and probably every meeting thereafter for the next month and a half, about how to handle your finances so you don't wind up in trouble like some other communities have done. A considerable amount of time was spent these last 2 weeks on Bowers Ave Wetland Restoration Project by meeting with the abutters and their attorney and reviewing the work of the Highway Department. The work is going very well. Chris Gonzalez and his crew are doing a great job. I mentioned that earlier. Finally, I would like to commend the Fire Department staff for the work they've done to replace twice the police system on the flagpoles of the town hall and the annex. They went out of their way to find a solution to the problems that we had and to correct them, and we thank them very much. That's it.
Okay, thank you, Jack.
Thank you.
Correspondence, action required. I don't think we have any.
No, that was just FYI.
I do want to mention again, Mr. Leonard's letter, there's no action required, but I did make a commitment on behalf of the board that we're not going to neglect the opening of the road in terms of public safety and try to be very conscious of the impact we could have with that road being open on people that live in that area and try to address their concerns going forward. Next, suggestions for future agenda items. We have affordable housing that we're going to be meeting on. And it does sound like we probably should have a separate meeting with the affordable housing group. Is that
Probably
Craig?
makes sense.
So you said you weren't going to be here next week. Is that
I'm here next week. I'm away
the
2 weeks.
following week?
Yes.
Next week's probably going to be too fast for the group, though, right?
Probably also we have the town meeting.
All right. Why don't you look at some dates with the affordable
Okay.
housing group and maybe email Jack with some suggested times, and then I can kind of work with the board on that.
Okay.
Mr.
Or
Chairman,
email me, whatever.
Steve is off this week, as you know. I'll be gone from the 10th to the 24th. Those 2 weeks, as I've indicated a couple of times to you.
Yep.
But Steve will be here
Okay.
to cover me, what I'm doing for him now.
All right. So
All right.
Diane, we're going to have a separate meeting. We'll clarify that, when that's going to take place. And a month from now, not the next meeting, because Craig won't be there, I want to have the conduct issues on there, conflict of interest law and code of ethics and so forth. Okay, other business? Hearing none, I think that closes around the table. Any comments, questions? I'm just wondering what the score of the game would be right now, but outside that, I don't have any.
We don't have Steve to tell us.
Yep.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes,
quick
yeah.
executive just to approve.
We're going to do the executive. I thought you were going to tell me the score, though.
All right, make a motion that we go into executive session pursuant to Mass General Law, Chapter 38, Section 21, to approve the executive session minutes of October 15, 2013. I, Richard Spurlett.
I, Craig Duchess.